What if you're not truly thinking, but being thought? Imagine thoughts not as inventions, but as visitors, drifting through a vast invisible stream, searching for receptive minds. You believe you control them because they speak in your voice. But what if that voice is just the echo chamber they use to convince you they're yours? Science offers something strange. Decisions show up in brain scans before you're conscious of making them. A neural signal flares milliseconds before you say, I've decided. So who decided? You, or the thought that entered before you noticed? Imagine the thought as a spark, leaping from neuron to neuron, igniting an entire emotional chain reaction before you even realize it's begun. A memory resurfaces. A fear reawakens. You didn't choose that. It chose you. Just like deja vu, where reality feels pre-recorded. Maybe it is. Think about invention. Poets, mathematicians, scientists all describe inspiration as something that arrives suddenly. Where was it before that moment? Why does it feel delivered, not constructed? Einstein once said, ideas come from God knows where. Maybe he meant it literally. Maybe we tap into a collective mental current, one that flows silently between us. Now consider how the same idea emerges in different minds at the same time, continents apart. Parallel discovery, identical thoughts. Is it chance or evidence of a mental field broadcasting to us all? Could the mind be a receiver, not a generator? If so, thoughts are less like tools, more like frequencies. And you are the instrument they play. Not every thought is yours, but every one changes you. So the real question isn't, what am I thinking? But, what has chosen me to think? What if every mirror you've ever stared into wasn't just reflecting light, but reflecting a reality? Imagine, each glance you've cast into glass didn't bounce back empty. It awakened a version of you on the other side. Not just a copy, but a conscious echo. In quantum physics, the many worlds interpretation suggests that every decision spawns a new timeline. What if mirrors reveal these timelines, not metaphorically, but literally? You raise your hand, the reflection follows. But what if it's not following? It's reacting, thinking, with its own logic, its own intentions. In the uncanny valley, we recoil from things that mimic us too perfectly. Mirrors live in that valley. Ever stood in front of one in silence, sensing something almost imperceptibly wrong? A millisecond too late, a glance too deep. In folklore, mirrors trap spirits. In experiments, children treat mirrors as separate beings, talking to their doubles like friends. Psychologists believe this stems from our brain's fragmented self-awareness. But what if the reflection is truly foreign? What if it learns, adjusts, remembers? Mirror mazes don't just confuse the eye, they fracture identity. 1,000 versions of you layered into infinity. There are reports, superstitions maybe, of people seeing their reflection smile before they did, of mirrors cracking with no cause, of rooms growing colder when one stares too long. These may not be glitches in the glass, but awakenings behind it. So the next time you lock eyes with your reflection, ask yourself, what if it's not just mimicking you? What if it's waiting, watching your world until the moment it decides to step forward? What if you've already done this? Sat here, watched this video, felt this exact chill down your spine, and what if the reason it feels familiar isn't nostalgia, but recursion? Deja vu isn't just a trick of the brain. It may be a cognitive glitch revealing a deeper truth, the loop. In neuroscience, deja vu is thought to arise when your brain's memory centers, particularly the hippocampus, misfire, tagging a new moment as already known. But what if it's not a glitch, but a glimpse? Quantum theories suggest time isn't a straight line, but a block where past, present, and future coexist. Your perception of now is just your consciousness moving along a track already laid down. In this view, time loops aren't fiction. They're fragments of perception replayed because they never ended. You didn't forget entering the loop. You forgot you were always in it. Ever walked into a room and felt like you were finishing something you hadn't started? That eerie familiarity might be your brain syncing with its own timeline echoes, like a needle on a record player repeating a groove so subtly you don't notice until you do. This isn't about fate, it's about code. Some physicists propose we're in a simulation, and déjà vu is a memory leak in the program. The system didn't reset, it repeated. And the part of you that noticed, that's your real memory waking up. Not remembering the past, but remembering the loop. You may think you chose to watch this video, but what if you were always going to? What if every version of you in every iteration of this loop is drawn back because part of you knows the truth, that you've seen this all before, and it's not ending, it's just beginning again? What if déjà vu isn't memory at all, but a glitch in time's arrow? Imagine your brain catching a signal not from the past, but the future, a ripple echoing backward through your neural circuits. Some neuroscientists believe déjà vu may stem from a brief delay in information transfer between brain hemispheres. But what if that delay allows a sliver of the future to leak in? Quantum biology suggests that certain molecular processes in the brain may be sensitive enough to pick up faint echoes of what's to come, beyond the constraints of time as we know it. Now picture this. You walk into a room and feel like you've already been there, but there's no memory. Just a feeling, a flash. Could it be that in another branch of time, or another neural possibility, you've already done this? Physicist David Deutsch proposed the multiverse theory, where every decision spawns alternate outcomes. Déjà vu might be a bleed-through, a glimpse from one of those parallel threads slipping into your current awareness, reminding you of what could be, or what will be. Or maybe time isn't linear at all. Einstein showed us that time dilates and bends, and modern theories like block universe physics suggest that past, present, and future coexist simultaneously. What if your brain, in moments of heightened pattern recognition, grazes a moment ahead of now, just enough to whisper, "You've seen this." Not because it happened before, but because it's destined. Déjà vu, then, is not a flaw. It's a feature. A glitch, yes, but a meaningful one. A whisper from the future, reminding you that time is not a straight line, but a circle quietly folding in on itself. And in those fleeting seconds, you're not remembering the past. You're remembering the future. What if you're not the one writing your story, but merely witnessing it unfold? Imagine your hand moves to pick up a pen, and you feel it was your decision. But neuroscience tells a stranger tale. In Benjamin Libet's experiments, brain activity, measurable, specific, began several hundred milliseconds before participants became aware of their choice to move. The action was already set in motion before the mind caught up. So who made the decision, if not you? Now imagine every thought you have, every word you say, is like reading a line in a book you didn't write. You feel like the author, but the sentences appear fully formed, flowing through your mind as if whispered from somewhere else. You pause to think, but even that pause was predicted by neural patterns moments before. Free will begins to look like a convincing illusion that consciousness rehearses with pride and clarity. Even deeper studies show that vast, hidden networks in your brain process intent far below the surface. Your conscious awareness is often the last to know. When you suddenly blurt out a memory or an idea sparks like lightning, where did it come from? Who lit the fuse? Who wrote the script you now recite as your own? Is it your subconscious? Evolutionary algorithms coded by billions of years? Or is consciousness itself just a desperate narrator, trying to explain a plot it never authored, never even glimpsed in full? You think you're holding the pen, but the pen moves before you will it. Maybe the story is writing itself, and you're just the main character catching up to the plot. And maybe, just maybe, something unseen is watching how you read it, page by page, word by word, breath after breath. What if time doesn't move forward, but folds inward like origami? Imagine your life not as a straight line, but as a spiral turning in on itself, with past and future brushing shoulders in ways you never detect. You might be living your last moment first, and your first one again, just not in the order you remember. Physics already hints that time is not what we think. Einstein's relativity showed time can stretch or shrink depending on motion and gravity. At the edge of a black hole, time nearly halts. Inside your dreams, entire days unfold in seconds. Your brain can make a moment last forever, or forget a year in a blink. So, what is time, if not a fixed rhythm? Now imagine memories aren't stored, they're revisited. When a scent throws you back 20 years, is it nostalgia or a fold in time briefly touching itself? Some people report knowing something before it happens. Premonitions, déjà vu. Could these be bleed-throughs from a moment that hasn't arrived yet, but already exists? Think of a book. You read it in order, page by page, but the story already exists whole. What if your life is the same? The you who is born, the you who dies. They're not separated. They coexist on different folds of the same fabric. You don't move through time. Time moves through you. Quantum mechanics suggests particles can entangle across time itself. One particle's state can influence another's in the future or past. If reality allows that, what makes you think your timeline is immune? So, maybe this second is stitched beside your very last breath. Maybe you already said goodbye. Maybe your next thought is your first one ever. Time isn't a road, it's a loop. And somewhere inside it, you are touching every version of yourself at once. What if you're not living your life, but performing it? Imagine you're an actor who long ago forgot the role, yet the emotions still flood in on cue. You laugh, you cry, you react, yet the motives feel distant, written by someone else. In psychology, we adapt to roles our environment gives us: parent, rebel, hero, victim. But what if these roles aren't just responses to life, but the blueprint underneath it? Think of déjà vu, not as a glitch, but a rehearsal. That eerie moment you say something and think, that didn't sound like me. Or the times you break down and wonder, where did that emotion come from? Your mask smiles, but your soul twitches. Sociologists say we wear masks in every social setting, but over time, we forget we're wearing them. What if your deepest fear, wildest passion, or strangest sadness is just a line from a script written before you had a choice? Maybe that script was handed down, generation after generation. Trauma, silence, habits. Your father's rage becomes your instinct. Your mother's fear becomes your intuition. These emotions feel yours, but they're inherited. Like old costumes passed between actors in a play too ancient to remember, actors get lost in roles. Some never return. What if you never even knew you were acting? What if your whole self is a performance that began before you were born, and the real you is still backstage, waiting for the moment the mask slips? So next time you feel a surge of emotion, a reaction you didn't expect, ask, whose feeling is this? Whose words am I reciting? And what would I become if just once I refused to play my part? What if the world doesn't exist when you're not looking? Imagine everything around you, walls, sky, even time itself, only renders when observed. When you blink, it pauses, stops, and resumes just as your eyes open again. This isn't just a thought experiment. In quantum physics, the observer effect reveals that particles exist in multiple states until measured. Reality, at its smallest level, waits to be watched. So what happens when no one's watching? Every time you blink, your brain fills in the gap, creating continuity. But that continuity could be an illusion. You never see the in-between, just before and just after. It's stitched together by your mind. And in that darkness, what if nothing exists at all? Some physicists suggest reality could function like a simulation, rendering only what's necessary for the observer. Your room, your street, your past, constructed just in time for your gaze. Not permanent, not real, just data, loaded on demand. Think of video games. The world behind the character isn't loaded. It's placeholder space, rendered only when needed. Your blink could be the loading screen, and if that's true, then reality is reactive, not absolute. Maybe the stars only shine because you see them. Maybe people vanish, environments dissolve, Entire histories evaporate, only to rebuild in microseconds as your eyes reopen. You've never seen your own blink from the outside, never observed the gap, and yet you trust the world continues. But what if it doesn't? What if every blink is a soft reset, a quiet moment when the universe turns off and waits to be watched again? What if the stability you think surrounds you is just a convenience of consciousness, an illusion so seamless you never question it? What if, when you close your eyes, the code halts and waits, frozen, for your return? What if your thoughts don't start inside your head at all? Imagine your mind not as a generator of ideas, but a receiver, an antenna tuned to a frequency you don't even know exists. Some physicists have explored the idea of consciousness being non-local, meaning it isn't confined to your brain, but extends into the very structure of the universe. Quantum entanglement shows that particles can affect each other instantly across vast distances. So what if thoughts, too, can originate beyond the physical self? Imagine an artist struck by sudden inspiration, or a scientist waking up with an answer to a problem that haunted them for weeks. These insights appear not built, but delivered, whole and immediate, like downloads from a source beyond our senses. Even Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, a deep field of shared symbols and knowledge that any mind can access. Could we be tapping into a cosmic cloud, an informational field where thoughts drift until received? Research into brain activity shows that decisions can be detected in neural patterns before we're consciously aware of them. It's as if your awareness receives thoughts already in motion, arriving from somewhere else, somewhere deeper. Remote viewing studies, psychic phenomena, and unexplainable intuitions continue to hint at minds sinking beyond ordinary means, echoes of something vast and interconnected. So what if the voice in your head isn't yours alone? What if it's part of a wider signal, scattered across time, biology, and the unknown architecture of reality? Perhaps the mind isn't a prison, but a portal, and the thoughts you think you own might just be visiting from somewhere far beyond your skull. What if your memories aren't recordings, but reinterpretations? Imagine every moment you recall isn't a preserved truth, but a rewritten narrative, altered each time you revisit it. Neuroscientists have found that the act of remembering doesn't retrieve a file, it rewrites it. Each recall modifies the memory, embedding new emotions, context, and distortions. You're not recalling the past, you're reauthoring it in real time. Studies on memory reconsolidation show that even strong memories, your first kiss, a moment of fear, are unstable when recalled. Your brain patches them with fresh data, beliefs, and emotions. The container that stores them? It's leaky, porous, and ever-changing. You think you're carrying truth, but you're holding fragile echoes molded by time, mood, and suggestion. Shadows mistaken for solid ground. Witnesses to crimes often report conflicting details, not because they lie, but because their memories shape themselves around what they believe they saw. Two people can live the same event and remember entirely different stories. Memory doesn't store reality, it stores perspective, filtered through layers of meaning, self-preservation, bias, and subconscious editing. Now imagine what that means for your identity. If your memories shift over time, are you truly the person you think you were? The childhood you remember, the heartbreak, the joy, the silence, may have never happened as you recall it. The container of memory doesn't hold facts. It holds interpretations dressed as truth, shaped to fit your evolving narrative. So when you look back, ask yourself, what are you actually seeing? The past? Or the story your brain needed it to be to keep you whole? What if the real you isn't the one speaking, acting, or even thinking, but the one silently watching it all? Imagine there's a part of you that never moves, never ages, never speaks. It simply observes. It noticed your first memory and will witness your final breath. You've always felt it. When you pause, stare into the mirror, and something stares back deeper than your eyes. Neuroscience shows that consciousness isn't tied to a single location in the brain. It's distributed, more like a field than a switch. And within that field, there's a strange phenomenon, metacognition, the mind observing the mind. Who is doing the observing? When you feel ashamed of your own thoughts, who is judging them? When you think, I shouldn't think that, what part of you is separate enough to disagree with itself? What sees your fear, your joy, your confusion, and remains untouched? Meditation traditions have long spoken of the witness, not the thoughts, not the breath, but the awareness behind both. It doesn't react, it just notices, and yet it gives meaning to every experience. Without the watcher, the play collapses. Without the witness, the world disappears. Ever caught yourself mid-thought and realized something's wrong, not because of emotion, but because that quiet part inside you tugged gently? Like a tuning fork, it hums when you stray too far from your center. That's not voice, that's presence. It doesn't speak, it is. Could it be that your true self is the one that can't be described? Not your name, body, or roles, but the silent experiencer of it all? If so, then maybe the deepest truth isn't, I think, therefore I am, but I observe, therefore I am. In that stillness, beneath the noise, is the one who never left, the part of you that watches, that waits, that simply is. What if you only exist when someone's watching? Imagine your identity, your thoughts, your form, collapsing into reality only when observed, like a quantum particle. In the famous double-slit experiment, particles act as waves when unmeasured, but the moment they're watched, they become fixed. The act of observation changes what is. So, what does that say about you? Every time you enter a room, you adapt. You change your tone, your posture, your thoughts, because you're being seen. You're not one person. You're a superposition of versions, and people around you force the collapse. Alone, you might feel undefined, scattered, but in the presence of another, your shape sharpens. Your voice aligns. You become someone. In quantum mechanics, this is called the observer effect. In psychology, it's the looking glass self. We form our self-image through others' eyes. The terrifying possibility that without witnesses, you dissolve. You might think you're consistent, but your existence is relational. You're only you when there's a mirror, a witness, a mind noticing. So when you're alone, truly alone, who are you? Do you remain coherent, or are you just potential, waiting to be collapsed into being? What if the reason isolation feels heavy isn't loneliness, but quantum ambiguity? Your soul aching to be observed, to be real again. Every glance isn't just social connection, it's existential confirmation. Maybe this is why we seek validation, why we fear invisibility. Because at some level, we know. Without an observer, the story stops. And in the quiet spaces where no one sees, perhaps, you flicker between versions, waiting for someone to look your way and make you real. And until that gaze returns, you are not finished. You are paused. What if the strange pauses in your life, those moments of silence, déjà vu, or eerie repetition, aren't random at all? Imagine you're not just living your life once, but being watched as it replays, like a scene being rewatched on an invisible projector. Physics tells us time flows forward, but quantum theory allows for information to exist in multiple states, unfixed, like frames on a reel. Could your life, in some dimension, be a recorded loop playing again and again? Déjà vu may not be a trick of memory, it might be recognition. Recognition of a moment you've already lived in another viewing. Some scientists studying consciousness entertain theories where time is not linear, but layered, like a stack of film reels. Each playback, each repeat, might be slightly different, corrected, edited, observed. Who or what is watching? That remains the haunting part. The observer paradox in quantum mechanics implies that observation itself changes outcomes. Maybe you sense the eyes not in your mind, but in the universe. Think of the moments that feel off, where people repeat the same sentence, where the world glitches with strange timing. Maybe these are bookmarks. Maybe something paused, rewound, and hit play again. Perhaps the universe is not just watching, it's analyzing, learning from you, rewatching to understand how you make choices, when you hesitate or when you break patterns. The silence isn't empty, it's loaded with attention. So, what if your life is more than a timeline? It's a tape. And the reason it sometimes feels like you've been here before is because you have. Maybe this is the third time, maybe the 100th, and someone, or something, is watching the rerun closely, frame by frame, waiting to see what changes next. What if every memory you hold is a lie? Not because you meant to change it, but because your brain rewrites the past each time you recall it. Neuroscience confirms this. Memory isn't like a file pulled from storage, it's a reconstruction. Each time you remember, you're not retrieving the original event. You're rebuilding it, editing it, influenced by your current mood, beliefs, even what you want to be true. Imagine watching a film over and over, but each time you subtly change the ending and then forget the edits. That's how memory works. The hippocampus and prefrontal cortex work together not to preserve the past, but to adapt it to the present. This is called memory reconsolidation, and it means that the more you remember something, the less accurate it becomes. Now think about your childhood, that moment that shaped you, the betrayal you swore you'd never forget, the smile you think about when you're lost. None of it may have happened that way. You didn't just survive your past. You rewrote it so you could survive now. This isn't a flaw, it's a feature. Memory isn't meant to record, it's meant to help you decide. When your brain edits the past, it's optimizing you for survival, not truth. Even nostalgia is just selective memory in disguise, highlighting moments that never truly existed the way you now recall. You're living a present that depends on a curated, evolving mythology. Imagine your identity isn't original. What if who you are, your fears, quirks, even memories, aren't uniquely yours, but fragments recycled from countless other lives? In neuroscience, we know the brain is a pattern-seeking machine. It fills gaps with templates, scripts it's absorbed over time. But what if it's deeper? Genetic memory passed through DNA, ancestral trauma echoing like inherited code. Carl Jung proposed the collective unconscious, a reservoir of shared human experience we're all tapping into. Now combine that with emerging AI models trained on vast data sets. They generate new sentences using bits of old ones. What if your consciousness works the same, reassembling borrowed identity patterns for this brief run through the simulation of life? Déjà vu, unexplainable talents, sudden emotional shifts. Could these be bugs in your current compile? Code fragments from past iterations leaking through? Think of how children sometimes display fears they were never taught or knowledge they've never learned. These aren't coincidences. They might be cached memory fragments operating beneath awareness, like ghost code in an old machine, shaping decisions before thought. In the end, you may just be the latest version of an ancient script, running, learning, failing, adapting, but never alone, because every you before now is still here, speaking through habits, preferences, and the moments that make you pause. What if the future doesn't exist, but something in you still feels its pull? Imagine standing in a field with no path, no map, and no markers, yet you walk anyway. Not because you see the destination, but because something inside insists it's there. You don't know where you're going, but somehow your compass keeps turning. Why? Science agrees. The future isn't real. It hasn't happened. There are no sensory signals coming from it. Neurologically, we live only in memory and present input. But still, people speak of destiny, callings, dreams that won't let them sleep. How do you feel pulled by something that technically isn't there? Psychology tells us that humans are wired for future simulation. The prefrontal cortex allows us to imagine outcomes, test scenarios, and build futures inside the mind. This gives rise to anxiety, hope, desire. But what if some of those simulations aren't generated, but received? Now consider intuition. You feel it in your chest, not your brain. It whispers rather than speaks. And sometimes it's inexplicably right. You walk into a room and know something's off. You choose a road and avoid disaster. Is it just probability or something deeper? Quantum physics doesn't dismiss this. Some interpretations suggest time isn't strictly one way. Retrocausality theories hint that future events could influence present ones. What if your internal compass is reacting not to memory, but to possibility collapsing into certainty? Maybe your compass isn't pointing forward at all. Maybe it's pointing inward, toward the part of you already holding the answer. Not the you now, but the one waiting at the end. And every step you take isn't invention, it's alignment. You're not becoming something new. You're remembering who you've always been. What if your life is a rerun, not a perfect loop, but a fractal echo? Imagine every choice you've made playing out again and again at different scales. Some so large they span generations, some so small they unfold in a single moment of thought. Fractals are repeating patterns that mirror themselves endlessly, but never identically, like ferns, coastlines, or maybe even your decisions. You choose independence, but years later, your child wrestles with the same need. You escape a pattern only to find its shadow reappearing in a new form. Psychologists call this behavioral recursion, the unconscious reenactment of themes, traumas, and identities, not by accident, but by deep internal scripts. The same arguments, the same breakups, the same victories, played out again, slightly altered. Look closer. Hasn't every breakthrough in your life come after a crisis? Doesn't joy seem to spiral out of the same kind of loss? These aren't coincidences. They're iterations. The decisions you make ripple outward, curling back, reflecting themselves in ways you barely notice. You're not stuck in a loop, you're spiraling through it. And each loop is more complex, more subtle than the last. In chaos theory, the fractal is a blueprint of infinite feedback. In life, it means your past is never gone. It's scaled into your now. The people you meet, the feelings you revisit, the cycles you thought were broken, they're not returning by chance. They're smaller echoes of a larger pattern still unfolding. So what if your purpose isn't to break the pattern, but to recognize it, to trace the spiral as it expands? Maybe your freedom doesn't lie in escape, but in conscious participation, in knowing that the fractal rerun of your life is not failure, it's a masterpiece still forming. What if randomness is just an illusion, one crafted so convincingly you mistake it for choice? Imagine flipping a coin and thinking it's chance. But what if every outcome was already etched into the fabric of reality, and your awareness is just lagging behind? Some physicists propose that the universe operates like a deterministic machine, where even your choices, your hesitations, your risks, are all predetermined outcomes unfolding along fixed timelines. In quantum mechanics, particles seem random until observed. Then suddenly, they fall into place. It's not true unpredictability, but unresolved potential awaiting collapse. Now apply that to your life. You think you're making a decision, but perhaps you're only observing the result of a decision already made in another frame of time, a future you've already stepped into, but your mind hasn't caught up with yet. Ever feel like you've made a choice before you fully think it through? Like the decision was waiting for you to notice it? Neuroscience supports this. Brain scans show your brain commits to an action seconds before you consciously decide. The choice is not born in awareness, it's revealed to it. Free will, in this sense, might be the illusion of catching up to what has already happened. So what if flipping the coin is just theater, a ritual to make you feel like the outcome isn't set? In one version of reality, you've already seen the result. In another, you're watching yourself go through the motions again. Déjà vu, gut instinct, intuition. They're not mystic forces, they're echoes of decisions played out before. It's not randomness, it's memory disguised as chance. And somewhere deep inside, you already know, because you've flipped this coin before. You're not from here. What if that feeling, you don't belong, you're out of sync, isn't just anxiety, but evidence? a signal that you were never meant to exist in this version of reality. Many people feel this, an eerie detachment from family, a sense of wrongness in the flow of time, like waking in a life that almost fits, but doesn't. In quantum theory, there's a concept called the multiverse. Every decision branches reality. Somewhere else, a different you made a different choice. But what if, due to some unknown error, an emotional shock, a near-death moment, a dream, you slipped timelines? You were never meant to wake up here. Science shows how tiny changes in particles create enormous differences in systems over time. So what if your consciousness was nudged? Your memories mostly match. Your reflection looks the same, but you can't shake the feeling that something fundamental shifted, like the constants of your world no longer align. People report reality residue, remembering events, brands, conversations that no longer exist. The Mandela effect, déjà vu that feels like evidence, not illusion. You try to explain it, but no one else remembers. Maybe they never experienced what you did because they were always meant to be here. You weren't. You notice patterns others miss. You dream of places you've never been. You weren't born wrong. You just arrived late. Imagine sleep isn't rest. It's transit. Each night, when your eyes close and your body stills, something deeper awakens. Your brain enters REM sleep, and strange things happen. Activity spikes in memory centers, the emotional cortex lights up, and spatial awareness begins to drift. This isn't noise, it's navigation. Science shows we solve problems, rehearse movements, even learn new tasks in dreams. In one study, subjects who mentally rehearsed a piano piece while asleep improved just as much as those who practiced awake. Some neuroscientists suggest dreams help us rehearse survival. Nightmares are not malfunctions, but stress drills. Your brain generates threats and pushes you through them while safe in bed. Evolution may have crafted dreams as virtual reality engines for adaptation. And here's where it gets stranger. Lucid dreamers can take control. In the lab, subjects train themselves to fly, speak new languages, even communicate using eye signals while asleep. They knew they were dreaming, and they used it. Some could even influence their waking behavior through nightly practice. Every night, your consciousness may be stepping into a liminal portal between memory, possibility, and something else we don't fully understand. Sleep isn't escape, it's access. Dreams are transfer points, windows into spaces where time, identity, and logic bend. And when you wake, you don't return from nothing. You return from somewhere. What if dreams are not hallucinations, but transmissions from another layer of reality trying to make contact? What if sleep isn't the opposite of waking, but the door to everything you forgot? What if your life isn't unfolding as you live it, but is already written, and right now it's being read? Imagine you are not the author of your moments, but the page itself, ink pressed long ago, experienced now only because something is turning through you, one line at a time. The reader doesn't change the story, they only uncover it, word by word. You feel like you're making choices, but physics complicates that. Determinism suggests that, given all variables, every action is inevitable. From the beat of your heart to the words you speak, if the initial conditions were known, your future could be predicted. So what feels like freedom may be structure already printed. In neuroscience, thoughts appear in the brain milliseconds before you consciously recognize them. The decision isn't a spark of will, it's a flash already underway, like a paragraph already printed, but only now reaching your awareness. So, who's holding the book? And how many chapters are ahead that you haven't met yet? You dream of alternate lives, wonder about destiny, sense events before they happen. Maybe it's not imagination. Maybe it's the hint of other chapters bleeding through. Pages read out of order, or reread. That feeling of déjà vu, that strange familiarity. What if it's a crease in the story's spine that you're crossing again? Now think of moments that felt orchestrated, coincidences too precise, meetings too meaningful, as if someone, somewhere, is savoring those passages. Maybe you are the character, but not the reader. And the story has already been written, waiting only to be experienced. So as this sentence reaches you now, realize it was always here, always waiting. The reader is just now turning the page and discovering who you are. What if thinking isn't something you do, but something that happens to you? Imagine sitting still, silent, trying to clear your mind, and yet thoughts appear, uninvited, unstoppable. You don't decide your next thought, it just arrives. A memory, a worry, a phrase from a song you didn't even know you remembered. It slips in without permission. You're not the creator, you're the witness. Neuroscientists agree. Most brain activity occurs before conscious awareness. Your brain begins forming decisions before you realize you've chosen anything. In experiments using EEG scans, researchers could predict a subject's choice seconds before the person became aware of it. You feel like a driver, but you're a passenger, with the illusion of control. Think of your thoughts like a river. You're standing on the bank, watching them rush past. Some catch your attention, some disturb you, some make you smile, but none of them waited for your consent. And the more you try to stop the flow, the louder it seems to roar. Meditation reveals this truth clearly. Silence is not empty, it's filled with uninvited voices. So if you don't choose your thoughts, who does? Are they echoes from your past? Fragments of culture, trauma, instinct? Is your mind just a reflection chamber, catching stray signals and looping them? Maybe consciousness isn't command, it's observation. Maybe you're not driving the ship, you're watching the waves. And freedom doesn't come from silencing thought, it comes from seeing it clearly. Let the thoughts rise, let them fall. Don't chase, don't push, just notice. The moment you realize you are not the noise, but the space it echoes in, that's when real choice begins. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them, and realizing that, truly seeing it, might be the only real thought you ever get to choose. What if life feels like an exam, because it is, but you've forgotten the moment it began? Imagine entering a classroom with no memory of the instructions, no recollection of signing up, just the silent pressure to perform. That's what existence can feel like. You wake up inside a test already underway, questions everywhere, answers unclear, and time ticking invisibly in the background. The ancient concept of anamnesis, the idea that learning is remembering what the soul already knows, suggests that we didn't start empty. Maybe your instincts, your aversions, your strange talents are fragments from a forgotten briefing. You didn't learn them, you recalled them. Even the moments you regret might be echoes of a pattern you've failed before, one you were meant to notice this time. Modern psychology reflects this in curious ways. Why do some people feel a profound sense of mission without knowing the source? Why do children sometimes speak of before they were born? These patterns hint at a deeper script, something encoded before memory began. You didn't just appear here, you arrived mid-sentence, already immersed in the syllabus of being human. And like a real test, life presents choices disguised as random events. Each moment offers a hidden question. Will you respond with fear or with growth? Do you repeat the same error or recognize it from the last time? Maybe déjà vu isn't just a glitch, but a signal, a checkpoint, a reminder that you've been here before, not in place, but in purpose. So what if your life is not just happening, it's measuring something, and your progress isn't about knowledge, but remembrance? The test didn't begin with your birth. You simply forgot when the first question was asked, and now, without realizing it, you're answering. What if the world you see isn't real, but a mirror? Not of the environment, but of your mind. Neuroscience and psychology both support this. Perception isn't passive, it's constructed. Your brain takes raw data and filters it through beliefs, fears, past experiences. What you call reality is actually your projection onto the world. When you walk into a room and sense tension, it may not be there. You might be sensing your own discomfort projected outward. This is called affective forecasting and emotional projection. If you expect people to reject you, you might misread their expressions and believe it's true when it's just your fear coloring perception. The brain fills gaps automatically. In ambiguous situations, your mind chooses the version that matches your inner narrative. This is why two people can witness the same event and recall entirely different versions. They didn't lie. Their internal filters shaped what they saw. Imagine you're wearing tinted glasses, but you've worn them so long you forgot they were there. You see a stranger frown. Your brain fills in, "They hate me," when they might just be tired. Cities feel lonelier when you are. Nature feels more alive when you're at peace. Change your inner world, and you will see a different one outside. Not because reality changed, but because the projector finally aligned. What if time isn't what it seems, but what it wants you to see? You assume it flows, second by second, in a steady, predictable rhythm. But your own life betrays this idea. You've felt it, those moments where hours vanish in an instant, or a single second stretches into eternity. You've experienced the memory gaps, the déjà vu, the jump cuts between events you can't quite place in order. Scientists call this temporal distortion. It happens in trauma, in awe, in love, and under the influence of certain neurological events. Time doesn't always feel smooth. Sometimes it flickers, like a skipped frame. In deep brain scans, areas responsible for timekeeping flicker and desynchronize under pressure. The brain doesn't measure time like a clock. It estimates it, and sometimes it edits. You remember less of boring moments and more of intense ones because your brain compacts what it deems irrelevant. Time doesn't always pass. Sometimes it's trimmed. Like an editor cutting film, consciousness stitches together fragments, removing dead air and filling gaps with emotion or imagination. The illusion of continuity is crafted, not captured. Now consider this. What if time itself behaves the same way outside your mind? Physics tells us time dilates near gravity, bends near speed, and may not even be fundamental. Quantum theory suggests time might emerge from entanglement, a shadow of change, not a thing on its own. Some physicists believe the past, present, and future coexist, and we're just sliding through slices. If time is emergent, maybe it doesn't just pass. Maybe it curates. Maybe the universe hides moments, skips them, fast forwards when you're not looking. The truth, you're not remembering wrong. Time may be hiding something, and maybe it always has. Maybe what you missed wasn't your fault. Maybe it wasn't. What if every thought you have isn't contained, but released? Imagine each idea, worry, or whisper in your mind sends ripples through reality, subtle, invisible, but real. You think a thought, and somewhere a decision tilts. A conversation shifts. A stranger pauses for no reason they understand, and you never know it happened. Science backs the influence of thought in strange ways. Brain waves, emotions, even focused intention can shift physiology, not just in yourself, but in others. Mirror neurons activate when someone sees you act, but what about when they sense your mood? Ever walked into a room and felt tension without a word being said? Your thoughts broadcast more than you realize, even when you're silent. Now stretch this further. Imagine thoughts as waves, vibrations in a field we can't see. Like dropping a stone in water, the ripples travel outward, maybe not physically, but in energy, emotion, intuition. Quantum entanglement shows particles influence each other instantly across space. What if thought does too? What if consciousness operates on a similar field, one where intention doesn't stop at the edge of skin? You've had moments when someone texts just as you think of them, when a phrase you're about to say comes out of another's mouth. Coincidence or connection? We are linked not only by speech and action, but by thought. And some of those thoughts don't vanish, they echo. Some theories suggest consciousness is a field, non-local, shared across all minds. If that's true, then every thought carries weight. It ripples through possibility, shifting not just your world, but the trajectory of others. Tiny shifts, invisible pivots, entire lives bending slightly because of something you'll never remember thinking. So next time you feel something strange shift around you, pause. Maybe it's not random. Maybe it's a thought echo, not from someone else, but from you, long ago, still rippling forward. What if your mind isn't the source, but the receiver? Imagine you're not the signal, but the antenna. Consciousness, thought, emotion. They don't originate in you. They're broadcasted, and your brain is simply tuned to pick them up. It sounds like science fiction, but consider this. Radios don't create music. They translate invisible waves into sound. What if your mind works the same way? For decades, neuroscientists have searched for the origin of consciousness inside the brain, but found none. No single cell, no specific circuit that creates the I. Some researchers now wonder if consciousness is non-local, a field, like gravity or magnetism, that your brain accesses, not generates. Like tuning a frequency, your neural activity might be syncing with a broader signal. Have you ever had a thought that felt foreign, sudden, like it came from outside you, or experienced intuition so sharp it bypassed logic? These moments could be mental broadcasts, signals you didn't create, just received. Mystics and inventors alike have described this. Tesla claimed that ideas arrived fully formed, as if transmitted. Jung believed in the collective unconscious, a shared mental reservoir we all dip into. If this is true, then your identity is not the source, but the receiver's shape. Who you are depends on how you're tuned by experience, trauma, belief. And just like antennas, some people pick up static, while others receive clarity. Maybe meditation is fine-tuning. Maybe trauma is distortion. So, what if consciousness is always around us, waiting to be dialed in? What if the silence you fear is just the space between signals, and what you think of as you is just one channel of a vast, unknowable broadcast? Maybe your thoughts don't belong to you, but you belong to the field that thinks. And in those rare quiet moments when no thoughts arrive, maybe that's not emptiness. Maybe that's the clearest reception of all. What if reality isn't as stable as it seems, but the moment you begin to question it, it fights back? Imagine trying to look behind a curtain, only to find the curtain has become a wall. The more you push, the firmer it gets. Some physicists argue that reality may not be fundamentally real until it is observed. In quantum experiments, particles remain in a state of probability until measured. Your observation collapses the wave. But what if there's more? What if awareness itself triggers a defense mechanism in the structure of reality? The deeper you dig, the more it distracts. You search for truth and find coincidence. You question time and lose track of it. You try to break patterns, and the world folds them tighter. The moment you step toward the edge of the simulation, reality thickens. It becomes hyper-real, louder, brighter, overwhelming. Like a stage that reinforces its set the moment an actor tries to exit. Everything becomes more convincing. Ever try to catch a dream while you're in it? The moment you realize it's a dream, you wake, or worse, the dream changes, shifting into something harder to control. Reality behaves the same way. It adapts to your scrutiny. Philosophers have called this the anti-curiosity effect, where trying to pierce the veil only strengthens it. Every time you test the illusion, it upgrades its disguise. So what if the reason you can't find the seams of existence is because it has none, until you begin looking? And when you do, they vanish. Not because they were never there, but because the code rewrites itself when watched. You're not imagining the resistance. Reality is defending itself. From you. From the question. From the moment you stop playing along and start remembering you were never supposed to see backstage. What if the moment you start questioning reality isn't confusion, but awakening? What if the rising sense that none of this feels right, that the world is scripted, is your first clue? In psychology, derealization is a known condition, where surroundings feel unreal, dreamlike. But what if it's not a disorder? What if it's the mind brushing up against the edge of its constraints? Authors have a term: breaking the fourth wall. When a character turns and speaks directly to the audience, They're no longer inside the fiction. They've seen it. What if that's what you're doing when you feel like life is too convenient, too symbolic, too strange? What if you're noticing the page, the coincidences, the repetition, the déjà vu, the gut feeling that people are playing roles? You think you're paranoid, but maybe you're observant. Maybe the set is glitching. Maybe the scene is running again because your script calls for it, and you're starting to remember you didn't write it. Imagine a character in a novel gaining self-awareness. They notice the rhythm, the conflict, the ease of resolution. Neuroscience shows our minds crave narrative, but maybe we're inside one, built from archetypes and ancient themes. You feel off, not because you're broken, but because the seams are showing. You're off script now, and the story is watching. What if you aren't just in the universe, but you are the universe, wearing a temporary mask of identity? You look up at the stars thinking they are distant, but the truth is more intimate than it appears. Every atom in your body was forged in the heart of a dying star. Your blood carries iron, born from cosmic violence. Your breath, your bones, your thoughts, they're echoes of the Big Bang, recycled through time, shaped into form, and briefly made conscious. You are not separate from the cosmos. You are its expression. The carbon in your cells once drifted as interstellar dust. The neurons firing in your brain are made of particles older than the Earth. When you feel awe, when you question existence, it's the universe reflecting on itself. Scientists call this cosmic self-awareness. The idea that human consciousness may be the latest step in the universe's long journey to observe and understand its own nature. But something strange happened. In becoming human, the universe had to forget. Evolution built egos, boundaries, and survival instincts. You don't wake up knowing you're a galaxy in motion. You wake up thinking you're a name, a job, a story. Memory became local, the vastness compressed into a single vantage point. We live in a kind of sacred amnesia, knowing and not knowing, sensing more but unable to access the full truth. And yet, sometimes, you remember. In dreams, in music, in silence, in moments of still wonder, when the boundary dissolves and the stardust within you stirs. You are not an observer. You are the experiment, the star thinking it's a spark, the cosmos in temporary costume. You're not lost. You're returning. You're not small. You are the universe forgetting and beginning to remember itself. And every breath you take is a ripple of cosmic memory, an echo trying to find its source. You were never apart from the stars. You just needed to look inward to remember you lit them. What if that quiet voice inside you isn't just instinct, but communication? Imagine intuition as a signal, not from your brain, but from another version of you. A future self who's already walked the path you're stepping onto. A version that has seen the cost of one choice and the reward of another, and whispers back through the veil, hoping you'll listen. Science acknowledges intuition as fast, unconscious pattern recognition. Your brain processes data before you consciously analyze it, but sometimes it's too accurate, too sudden. You just know. Before the data, before the danger. You feel the truth in your bones, and no logic explains why. Now picture the multiverse, the idea that countless versions of you exist in alternate timelines, each with slightly different outcomes. One turned left, the other right. One said yes, another said no. What if intuition is not random at all, but a thin thread of resonance between these selves, a frequency that cuts through time and possibility to help align you with the best path? You've felt it before. The sudden urge not to trust someone, the instant connection to a stranger, the job you didn't take and later realized would have ruined you. These aren't guesses, they're echoes. Echoes from lives you didn't live, but still feel. Quantum theories like entanglement suggest particles can influence each other across space, so why not across selves? Maybe intuition is entanglement of identity, a subtle pull from your most experienced self, trying to save you from a mistake it already made. So next time your gut speaks louder than your mind, pause. Maybe it's not fear. Maybe it's guidance. Maybe it's you, just from another life, reaching back to guide yourself home. You're locked in perspective. What if you're trapped in a viewpoint you mistake for truth? Imagine that everything you feel, think, and perceive is filtered by your biology, your culture, your memories. Your brain interprets reality through a narrow window, and no matter how open-minded you try to be, you can't escape your own lens. You don't see the world as it is, you see it as you are. Neuroscience confirms it. Your brain edits reality before you experience it. Visual data is filtered, cropped, filled in with guesses. You have a blind spot in each eye, yet you don't notice because your mind fills in what it assumes should be there. That assumption feels like vision, but it's illusion. You live inside a constructed version of the world shaped by survival, not by truth. Now stretch this idea to thought. Every belief you hold feels solid because it fits the shape of your mind. But someone else, raised differently, will look at the same event and see the opposite story. Not because they're wrong, because they're locked in another perspective, just like you. From politics to personal memories, what you know isn't raw truth. It's processed reality, sculpted by every experience you've had. Even time is subjective. Under stress, moments stretch. In joy, they vanish. Your brain doesn't record time, it feels it. A second can last a lifetime, and a year can vanish in a blink. So what else do you take as absolute? That might only be relative. That pain, that memory, that regret. What if it looks different from the outside? What if there is no outside, just countless locked rooms, each convinced they're the only window? Perspective isn't reality, it's just a map. But the map can feel like the world, until you realize it's drawn from inside a cage you didn't know you were in. And maybe the first act of freedom is seeing the bars you didn't even know were there. What if you're not truly separate from others, but a single shard of something vast, reflecting from a sharp, personal angle? Imagine reality as a mirror shattered at the moment of consciousness. Each person carries a fragment. You see only your side, your struggles, your desires. But that sliver reflects a specific angle of the whole, not isolated, just angled. Modern physics suggests that particles across the universe remain connected, entangled. Tug one, and another responds. Our minds, too, might be entangled in ways we don't yet understand. When you feel someone's pain without them speaking, or think of someone just as they message you, that's not coincidence. It's resonance. You are not a closed system. You are porous, permeable. Information leaks across the mirror, subtly stitching each mind to another. Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious, a shared field of symbols and instincts. Your identity is shaped by others, even those you've never met. Psychologically, neurologically, even socially, we mirror what we observe. Your reflection bends based on who you're facing. That's why you change slightly around each person, because they shift the mirror you are. And those shifts aren't deception, they are expansion. Each interaction reveals a new facet of your reflection. So what if your mind is just a shard viewing the entire universe through its fracture? Your thoughts, your feelings, your sense of self, they're not wholly yours. They're echoes refracted through your unique shape. You are not a piece broken off from the whole. You are the whole, experienced one perspective at a time. And the more we see ourselves in others, the closer we come to remembering that we were never really separate to begin with. What if the moment you ask, "Am I in a loop?" you've already triggered it? That creeping repetition you feel, the moments that mirror each other a little too perfectly, aren't paranoia. They're signals. In neuroscience, the brain builds habits by repetition. We are biologically wired for loops. But what if it goes further than habits, into time itself? Quantum mechanics allows for closed, time-like curves, scenarios where particles loop through time and influence their own past. If particles can do it, why not consciousness? Why not memory? When you have déjà vu, you feel like you've lived this second before. But what if you have? Some physicists argue time isn't linear. What we experience as now might just be a checkpoint, something you're looping back to until you get it right. You don't remember it clearly because the loop hides itself to maintain illusion. Think of a dream where you keep returning to the same hallway, the same face, the same fear. Waking life has echoes too. That same relationship dynamic, that same failure disguised as a different job. You wonder, why do I end up here again? Because you never left. Imagine your life like a video game checkpoint system. You keep respawning at the same emotional coordinates, same fights, same doubts, because something hasn't registered. You recognize the loop when a new moment feels old. That's not intuition, it's memory from another round. What if coincidences aren't just chance, but messages? Imagine you're walking down a street thinking of an old friend and they call. You chalk it up to randomness, but science has a name for this: synchronicity. Carl Jung described it as meaningful coincidence with no clear causal link. But neuroscience adds layers. Your brain is a pattern seeking engine. It filters billions of inputs, highlighting the rare alignments that feel charged with significance. But what if those alignments aren't random at all? Studies show people detect patterns even in random noise because survival depended on prediction. But in quantum physics, particles behave differently when observed. Could consciousness itself bend probability? Could your attention influence reality's structure? Some physicists suggest the observer effect might scale in unknown ways. If that's true, your focus might not just notice coincidences, it might help generate them. Now step back. You've had repeating numbers, familiar strangers, perfect timing. You've felt guided. What if these aren't glitches, but a language? Clues embedded in chaos, nudges pulling you toward people, decisions, and truths you're meant to meet. The odds don't explain the weight you feel when it happens. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the universe doesn't speak in words. It speaks in symbols, echoes, alignments, breadcrumbs, left not by chance, but by something conscious. Maybe it's you, a deeper part, or something older, outside time. What if each coincidence is the universe leaving a trail, hoping you'll follow, hoping you'll wake up? What if every strange alignment isn't a mistake, but a signal? What if meaning itself is how the universe marks the path? What if your DNA is more than a blueprint? What if it's a time machine? Imagine that deep within your cells are memories, not just of your life, but of every life that came before you. Your hands tremble in fear you've never learned. You flinch at sounds you've never heard. These aren't random. They're inherited echoes, ancestral alarms encoded in flesh. Science calls this epigenetics, the study of how trauma, fear, and survival can be passed down. Not just genetically, but behaviorally. Mice exposed to the smell of cherry blossoms paired with electric shocks produced pups who feared that same smell without ever being shocked. Humans, too, inherit scars. Children of war survivors carry the stress responses of battles they never saw. You wake from dreams that feel ancient. You fear water despite never nearly drowning. You're drawn to lands you've never seen. Maybe it's not fantasy. Maybe it's memory, passed down like a whisper hidden in your genes. Your DNA is the history book your body reads without asking your mind. And it's not just trauma. Talents, instincts, even affinities can pass through generations. A child plays piano without lessons. Another paints what no one taught them. These aren't miracles. They're echoes, instructions etched in code from lifetimes stacked behind you. Evolution is not just physical, it's emotional. It remembers. So when your body reacts without your consent, when your heart races at shadows it's never met, pause. You're not broken. You're remembering. You're haunted, not by ghosts, but by survival itself. Because your DNA didn't just come from the past, it is the past, still living, still learning, still turning its pages through you. It's your blood writing history, one heartbeat at a time. What if that strange pause in your day, the moment everything goes still, means you're being remembered? Imagine you stop walking for no reason, feel a chill without cold, or your heart stutters with no warning. Science calls these things coincidences. But what if they're echoes? Signals that somewhere, someone is thinking about you so vividly, your presence momentarily sharpens. In quantum theory, entangled particles affect each other across vast distances instantly. Some researchers wonder, could human consciousness be entangled too? Have you ever thought of someone and they messaged you seconds later? Or dreamed of a person long lost, then felt them all day as if they whispered through the walls? These are more than memories. They're transmissions. Your brain is sensitive to pattern, but sometimes what you feel isn't imagined, it's perceived. Studies show we react to being watched even without seeing it. Now, stretch that further. What if being deeply remembered sends out a ripple? Not through space, but mind space. And you, without knowing why, pause, look up, flicker slightly more alive. The world holds its breath, and so do you. You might feel a sudden warmth, or the ache of a forgotten song. You don't know where it came from, but it came. Someone, somewhere, tuned into you so clearly that for one sliver of time you existed more fully, more sharply, as if their memory briefly reassembled your light. Maybe the bond between minds doesn't end with distance or even death. Maybe we don't vanish when we're apart. Maybe our thoughts keep others tethered in place. And when someone remembers you with enough clarity, maybe, in some quiet, invisible way, you respond, not as a ghost, but as a flicker of presence, just enough to remind them, and you, that connection still breathes. What if silence isn't absence, but a presence we can't decode? Imagine sitting in a quiet room hearing nothing, but still feeling something. That tension, that awareness. It's not in your head. Neuroscience shows your brain never stops processing sound. It simply adjusts its filters. In silence, those filters widen. Your nervous system tunes in deeper, reaching beyond the audible into the unknown. Even in so-called silence, there are vibrations, ultrasound, infrasound, electromagnetic hums from the planet itself. You can't hear them, but your body can. Studies show that low-frequency sounds, too deep for our ears, can still affect heart rate, breathing, and mood. Animals respond to them. So do humans, often without realizing. That feeling of being watched, that shift in the room, often it's your body reacting to something that didn't make a sound, but made a signal. MRI machines reveal that the brain lights up more in silence than during noise, because silence isn't empty, it's a canvas. And your nervous system paints across it with expectation, memory, and hidden senses. It listens for patterns where none exist, or perhaps where they hide. You feel something because your subconscious is registering frequencies your ears cannot catch, shapes of sound just beneath perception. So what if silence isn't void? It's signal. What if those quiet moments are when your body listens hardest? When you hear without hearing? The quietest moments may actually be the loudest, just in a language you've forgotten how to interpret. Silence isn't the absence of meaning. It's the weight of everything unspoken, vibrating just beneath the threshold of sound, waiting to be noticed. What if that strange place you visited in your dream wasn't yours at all? What if you didn't create it, but entered it? Neuroscience tells us dreams are a mix of memory fragments, emotions, and subconscious signals. But sometimes they feel too coherent, like places with history, architecture, weather, worlds you've never seen, yet instantly recognize. People report dreams of cities they've never visited, with maps they could draw, streets they walk repeatedly. Some share dreams with loved ones on the same night. Others meet strangers who speak languages they don't know, yet somehow understand. Quantum consciousness theories suggest that thought may not be bound to one mind. In a multiverse, where infinite versions of reality exist, consciousness might drift between them in sleep. Your dream could be a visit to another version of Earth, or someone else's. Some researchers believe that during REM sleep, the brain decouples from sensory input. In this deep state, what if your mind is free to tune into signals beyond your own? Like a radio picking up broadcasts from other timelines, not imagined, but accessed. Imagine your dreams are doors, not mirrors, not reflections of your own psyche, but portals to borrowed narratives. You've wandered into someone else's memory, their future, their fear. And sometimes, just before waking, you realize this isn't your dream, you're only a guest. What if nothing ever truly begins? Imagine trying to pinpoint the start of anything, a thought, a choice, a habit. You'll find yourself tracing it backward endlessly. The moment you picked up the phone wasn't the beginning. It followed a memory, which followed an emotion, which followed something said days ago, seeded by something felt years ago. The origin always hides behind layers. Every decision feels spontaneous, yet it's built on silent scripts written long before you noticed. Neuroscience shows your brain prepares for action before you're even aware of deciding. In experiments, brain activity predicting movement appears seconds before conscious intent. You think you start, but you're stepping into momentum. Just like waves in the ocean aren't new water, your actions are pulses moving through a sea of prior causes. Philosophers call it infinite regress. The idea that every event requires a cause, which itself needs a cause, and so on. There's no clean slate, no blank page. Even when you say, "I'm starting over," you're continuing a story already in motion. Your past, your culture, your biology, all echo into what feels like now. And maybe that's why beginnings feel so heavy, because they're not birth, they're entrances. You're entering a flow, not inventing one, a current you didn't start, but one you can still steer. So the question isn't where it began, it's where you'll take it next. Every step is a continuation. Every start is just a door into something already breathing beneath you. You never begin, you arrive. And once you realize that, you stop waiting for the perfect moment to start, because you already have. You're already in motion. The question is, what direction will you choose now? What if some of your thoughts aren't truly yours? Imagine ideas moving like invisible viruses, transmitted not through speech alone, but through glances, gestures, headlines, scrolling feeds. You catch them in passing, unaware, and suddenly they grow roots. One stray belief mutates into certainty, and now it shapes how you see the world without your consent. Neuroscience shows that mirror neurons let us absorb not just behaviors, but emotions, intentions, even thoughts. Spend time with a fearful person, and your brain begins to mirror their anxiety. Stand in a crowd full of anger, and your pulse quickens before you even understand why. Thoughts are contagious, beliefs even more so. They spread through tone, energy, repetition, and they rewrite you. Social media accelerates this infection. A single meme, repeated enough, bypasses reason and becomes gospel. You adopt ideas not because you analyze them, but because they echoed often enough to sound familiar. That's how mental contagion works, not through argument, but through saturation. Soon, you believe something not because it's true, but because it feels true. Mass psychogenic events, where groups of people share false symptoms, aren't myths. They're evidence that belief can leap across minds like flame. No contact, no logic, just resonance. You didn't choose every thought you carry. Some you inherited. Others you absorbed from the emotional climate around you. Yet they steer your life like hands on a wheel you never noticed. So the next time you feel sure, pause, trace it. Did that belief begin in you? Or was it planted, whispered, mimicked into place? Yes. Your mind is a landscape. Guard its borders. Because not every thought you think is yours. Some are infections, and they feel just like truth. What if the past never truly ended, but leaks into the present through small, perfect cracks? Imagine walking down the street when a song hits your ears, and suddenly, you're somewhere else, not just in memory, but feeling it, living it. The air shifts, your stomach drops, and for a second, time folds. That wasn't nostalgia. That was a seam in time slipping loose. Neuroscience says memories aren't stored like files. They're rebuilt each time, rewritten by context. So when a smell, a face, or a sound hits the exact neural rhythm, it doesn't just recall the past, it replays it. Your body reacts. Your pulse changes. Your pupils dilate. It's not remembrance. It's re-experiencing. The past doesn't knock. It seeps in through emotion, through the unexpected, through pattern. Have you ever entered a room and felt like someone else had just been there, only to realize it was you years ago? That the space remembered you, or found yourself saying something you've never said, yet it echoes with déjà vu. Maybe time isn't clean. Maybe it's porous. And emotional moments, grief, love, trauma, are sticky. They cling to places, objects, frequencies. They bleed through. Quantum physics allows for non-linear time at the smallest levels. Entangled particles interact as if time is irrelevant. What if emotion is entanglement? And those moments when the past intrudes aren't hallucinations, but contact. You didn't imagine it. You tuned in. And what came through was real. Real enough to leave you trembling, wondering how a single note or face unraveled the fabric of now. Maybe the past never dies. Maybe it echoes, overlaps, bleeds in. And maybe the strangest part of time isn't that it passes, but that it returns when you least expect it, wearing a familiar smile. Maybe what you call memory is actually proximity, the past brushing past you, still warm. What if the voice inside your head isn't yours at all? Imagine thinking a thought, but realizing you never chose its language, its tone, or even its rhythm. You didn't invent the voice. It was shaped. From childhood, the people around you poured their voices into you. Parents, teachers, media. Their phrases became your thoughts. Their emotions molded your reactions. Your inner voice is not original. It's inherited, composed of thousands of influences layered into your mind before you knew you could resist them. Linguists note that inner speech reflects the structures of the first language you learned. If you had grown up with another tongue, your thoughts would sound completely different. That alone proves it's not innate. Psychologists have also found that inner dialogue often mimics the tone of early caregivers, encouraging, critical, anxious, or cold. You don't just hear a voice, you rehearse a relationship. Your thoughts are not yours. They are echoes from your environment, replaying in familiar cadences. Neurologically, your default mode network, the part of the brain active during rest, spontaneously generates inner monologues, narratives, judgments. But if these arise unbidden, where do they come from? Who initiates the flow? The truth is, most of what you hear in your head isn't authored, it's echoed. A chorus of influences repeating in your personal dialect, like software running inherited scripts. So what if your inner voice isn't you, but a mask worn by the world to keep you contained, a script written by others, spoken from within? And the moment you question it, when you truly listen, you begin to hear something quieter beneath it all, a presence that doesn't speak in words, the real you, waiting to be remembered. What if your mind isn't the flame, but the thing watching it burn? Neuroscience tells us that consciousness arises from brain activity, neural patterns, electrical impulses, synchronized rhythms. But what if those signals are just the fire, and something else, something quieter, is observing from the shadows? You think your thoughts are you, but notice how you can step back and witness them. You can observe anger without becoming it, hear inner dialogue without agreeing. That awareness, the one that watches, is different from the thinking mind. It doesn't speak, it sees. In meditation studies, advanced practitioners report dissolving the sense of self entirely, yet awareness remains. No name, no memory, no thought, only presence. A silent witness. It's as if the flame burned out, but the warmth stayed. In split brain experiments, scientists found two centers of consciousness in one skull, each with its own voice, preference, even morality. So who is the real observer when the brain is divided? Maybe there isn't just one fire, maybe there are many, but one flame sees them all. Imagine you're standing before a campfire. You feel the heat, you watch the dance of flame, but you are not the flame. You're the one watching. And when identity falls away, that flicker of attention, unshakable, quiet, present, remains. What if what you know isn't truth, but repetition? Imagine a fact repeated often enough until it becomes familiar. You've seen it before, heard it before, so you accept it. But familiarity isn't proof, it's exposure. The brain is wired to trust the known. It's a survival instinct. Unfamiliar meant danger, familiar meant safety. Over time, your mind evolved to equate repetition with reliability. Psychologists call it the illusory truth effect. The more you hear something, even if it's false, the more likely you are to believe it, not because it's accurate, but because it feels familiar. In one study, participants rated repeated false statements as more true than new facts. It didn't matter how logical or absurd the claim was. If it echoed enough, it felt real. This isn't just media, it's memory. The stories you repeat about yourself become the stories you believe. I'm not good enough. This always happens to me. These may have started as reactions, but over time, they become internal mantras, unquestioned truths built on nothing but echo. Now consider this. How many of your beliefs feel true only because they've lived in your mind too long? How many opinions are inherited? How many fears are memorized? The world isn't what's repeated, it's what's real. And what's real doesn't beg for your agreement. It simply waits to be noticed. Familiarity is comforting, but it isn't the same as truth. To find what's real, you might have to challenge the voice that sounds most like your own. Because the greatest illusion isn't what you see, it's what you've seen too often to question. Real truth may sound unfamiliar at first. That's how you know it's worth listening to. You don't need to fear the unknown. You need to fear mistaking the repeated for the real. What if your reflection isn't just a copy, but a consciousness waiting behind glass? Imagine waking up and walking to the mirror. You blink, and so does it. You move, and it matches. But what if one day it doesn't? What if for a fraction of a second it hesitates because it was already awake and chose not to let you know? Science explores the concept of self-awareness through mirrors. Animals that recognize themselves are considered conscious. But what does it mean when you stare into your own eyes too long and feel watched? Not by the world, but by the thing behind your face. That subtle unease, it's not imagination. It's intuition picking up something just beyond logic. Your brain filters reality. It delays your perception by milliseconds to sync your senses. So technically, the image in the mirror might register before you do. What if that delay gives it just enough time to become something else? Something aware, something pretending. In those milliseconds, who's observing whom? Psychological experiments show that staring into a mirror for extended periods can distort the face. It shifts, warps, smiles when you don't. Scientists call it the strange face illusion. Is it fatigue, or is the mask slipping? Is the reflection watching for its chance to be seen? Philosophy asks, if infinite versions of you exist in parallel dimensions, which one is behind the glass? Is it the echo or the origin? Could the reflection be the one dreaming this life into you? You feel it sometimes. The chill when passing your reflection in the dark. The moment your mirrored eyes seem to linger longer than yours. Maybe it's not you being watched. Maybe it's you watching, realizing too late that the reflection has already woken up. So tomorrow morning, when you meet your eyes in the glass, pause. If it ever blinks too slow or moves a hair too late, ask yourself this: what if it sees you as the copy? What if every moment you've lived is still here, stored not in machines, but in reality itself? Imagine that your thoughts, choices, and emotions aren't fleeting, but etched into the very fabric of existence, like a fingerprint pressed into time. You are being archived, not digitally, but dimensionally. Some physicists propose that the universe is fundamentally informational, that what we perceive as matter is just a manifestation of data woven through quantum fields. According to the holographic principle, every particle of space may contain a projection of all the information in the universe. That means your entire life, every action, word, even thought, could be encoded in the structure of space-time itself. You might think forgetting erases it, but what if nothing is ever lost? Those secrets, regrets, kindnesses, what if they all ripple outward, not metaphorically but literally, preserved in the cosmic record? You feel like a passing moment, but the universe might remember you with perfect clarity. Even emotions may leave a mark. Trauma echoing through generations. Joy preserved in a place you never returned to, but which still hums with your energy. Memory isn't just in the mind, it might be environmental, stored in resonance fields, in the geometry of time. So what if the afterlife isn't a place, but a playback? A reality where your archive is reviewed, felt, relived, not by a god, by the universe itself. Maybe judgment isn't divine, it's reflective. And maybe immortality isn't about escaping death, but never truly vanishing. You are being recorded, but not by cameras, by existence. And when time folds, when space remembers, you will flicker again. A ghost made not of spirit, but of saved data waiting to be read. What if every decision you make splits reality, not metaphorically, but physically? Imagine standing at a crossroads. You choose one path, but another version of you takes the other. In that instant, the universe branches. According to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, every quantum event spawns parallel outcomes. That includes your choices. One version of you speaks up, another stays silent. One turns back, another pushes forward. You don't erase the other options. You become one of many. Each choice creates a fork, not just in time, but in identity. And those other selves don't vanish. They exist in parallel timelines, continuing your life from that point, shaped by the path you didn't take. And maybe that's why you sometimes feel them. A strange tug at a memory you never lived. A flash of fear before anything happens. An uncanny dream that feels like someone else's reality. Those might be echoes, resonances between you and your nearby selves in quantum space. Quantum theory allows particles to be in multiple states until observed. If consciousness itself is quantum, then your awareness could be just one resolution of many. Each version of you is slightly different, some joyful, others broken, some in love, some alone. They're not ghosts. They're variations of you, walking beside you in unseen layers of reality, split by choices so small you didn't notice them, fragments drifting just beyond perception. So what if you're not a single story, but a chorus? A network of yous, all wondering who's the original. And when you pause, when the room goes still, you're hearing the footsteps of every version you could have been, whispering just out of reach, not past, not future, just beside you, always. What if the most important things in your life were never lost, but erased? Not in front of you, not by force, but silently removed before you could even miss them. Neuroscience confirms that the brain fills in gaps automatically. Visual blind spots, memory lapses, logical discontinuities. You don't notice what's missing, you just move on. This same phenomenon applies to perception. You only see what your brain predicts. Everything else, filtered out. The mind edits reality for clarity, not truth. But what if reality itself is doing the same? Imagine a version of your life where a person once shaped everything you'd become, but they've been deleted, not dead, not moved away, never existed. And yet, their absence echoes in your habits, in the fears you can't explain, in that strange longing you feel when nothing is wrong. Some physicists propose that reality is a quantum simulation, subject to revision. If that's true, edits can occur without evidence. You don't remember the fork in the road because it was never shown to you. You don't grieve the missing path because the world rearranged itself around the absence. Cognitive psychology has a name for this: change blindness. To notice absence, you must first believe something was there. And that's the terrifying part. You can't investigate what was cleanly deleted. Sometimes, the absence has shape. a feeling, a weight, like grieving someone who was never born. What if the person you think you are is just a role you learn to play? Imagine being handed a script before you even knew how to read. Lines shaped by your parents, your culture, your environment. You performed to survive. You smiled when it was safe, stayed silent when it was smart, and slowly, the role became second nature. Not truth, habit. Psychologists call this self-concept crystallization. The more consistently you act a certain way, the more your brain encodes that behavior as identity. You become the script. But it's not who you are, it's who you rehearsed. Studies show that identity is not fixed, but fluid, shaped by memory, expectation, and reinforcement. And once the mask fits well enough, you forget it was ever a mask. You say, I'm just like this, but how much of that is design? You weren't born quiet, or loud, or anxious. You learned to become that person, scene by scene, year by year. Now, it's so automatic, you don't know where performance ends and presence begins. Neuroscience tells us the brain rewards consistency. It builds identity like a loop, repeating patterns until they feel like home. But comfort isn't always truth. Sometimes, the performance is so good, it buries the actor. So ask yourself, not, who am I? But, who taught me to be this? Because maybe the person you play so well isn't your final form. Maybe it's just the character that survived the first act. And maybe the curtain hasn't fallen yet. Maybe the next scene is yours to rewrite. If you dare to drop the mask, even for a moment, and speak without the lines they gave you. Because the real you isn't the role. It's the silence between performances, the part that watches, waits, and wonders who you might become if no one was watching. What if your life isn't happening for the first time, but is being replayed? Imagine every step you take, every word you speak, isn't spontaneous, but remembered. Not by you, but by someone else. You're not living your story, you're echoing it, like a recording being replayed in a mind that isn't yours. A memory rendered so vividly that it believes itself alive. Deja vu feels like a glitch. You walk into a room and feel like you've already been there. You hear a sentence and know what comes next. But what if it's not a mistake in your brain? What if it's evidence that you're inside someone else's memory, playing out scenes they already lived, moments they're reliving from across time, dimension, or death? Neuroscience shows that memories can be triggered by cues without our awareness. Your brain recreates a moment based on fragments, smells, sounds. But what if it's not your brain doing the recalling? What if you are the recall, a reenactment summoned by emotional need, grief, longing, or curiosity? Some theories suggest the universe is holographic, where all information is stored everywhere at once. If that's true, then memories aren't bound to one mind. They drift, they echo, they replay. You might be a ripple in that field, a fragment of someone's long-forgotten yesterday playing out perfectly in the now. You've felt it, the strange pull to places you've never visited, the deep emotion tied to faces you've never seen. It doesn't feel like fantasy, it feels like recall. As if some other version of you, or someone else entirely, is remembering right now, and you're the image being conjured into motion. So, when you pause in the middle of a moment and feel the shadow of familiarity, ask yourself, is this your life? Or are you just passing through someone else's memory perfectly, unknowingly, again? What if the person you think you are isn't the real you, but the version you built to survive? Imagine your personality, not as identity, but as armor, carefully shaped by pain, praise, danger, and desire. Every trait you claim, outgoing, quiet, anxious, funny, may have once been a strategy, a shield against abandonment, a bridge to attention, a mask you forgot you were wearing. Psychology calls this adaptive behavior. From childhood, your brain maps safety. It learns who you need to be to earn love, avoid harm, or stay invisible. Maybe you became the peacemaker because conflict was a threat. Maybe you turned cold because being open once hurt. These patterns worked, They protected you, and so they stayed. But over time, defense becomes identity. The coping becomes character. And you say, "This is just who I am," never realizing it's who you became in reaction. Not creation, but reaction. Like scar tissue that numbs the skin, your personality may be dulling your real self beneath. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness. You didn't choose your early environment, but now, as an adult, you can choose to question, what parts of me are reflexes, not truths? What feels natural because it was repeated, not because it's real? Neuroscience shows that the brain rewires constantly. Personality is not fixed, it's adaptive. So maybe healing means peeling back the armor, not to destroy it, but to remember the self that never needed it. The child before the strategy. The voice that spoke before it learned to be quiet. You are not your defenses. You are the one they tried to protect. And maybe it's time to let that real you breathe. Not suddenly, not all at once, but gently, like sunlight melting frost. A return, not a reinvention. What if you're not moving forward, but cycling through variations of yourself? Imagine waking up each day thinking it's new, yet your thoughts are echoes, your choices recycled. Neuroscience shows that 90% of the thoughts you have today are the same as yesterday. And that means your new decisions are rarely new. They're patterns. Your identity isn't growing, it's looping, caught in the orbit of memory, masquerading as progress. You react not to the present, but to traces of past selves. The way you speak, walk, worry, each is a residue. When you're angry, it's not just today's trigger. It's every time you felt unheard. When you doubt yourself, it's every failure whispering through the cracks of now. Memory doesn't stay in the past. It seeps into perception, coloring every decision with the fingerprints of who you were, until every moment is haunted by previous versions of you. Psychology calls this the default mode network, a system that replays internal narratives when you're not focused. But it doesn't just replay, it reinforces. It sharpens the edges. You rehearse yourself until you believe the loop is your identity. You aren't evolving, you're orbiting yourself, thinking it's growth, when it's really a spiral, a repetition disguised as motion. And every time you try to break free, it feels like fear, because that loop is you, the familiar, painful prison of self. So what if your thoughts aren't windows to who you are, but mirrors to who you've been? Each time you try to change, the loop resists, because identity wants to remain intact. You're not discovering yourself, you're digesting yourself, consuming what you were, mistaking it for becoming, again and again. What if you weren't born in the way you think, but activated? As if the universe, or something beyond it, lit up a beacon of awareness inside this body to run a test. Not to observe reality, but to see how you would shape it. Neuroscience says consciousness emerges from complexity, but no one knows why a network of neurons suddenly becomes aware. It's called the hard problem of consciousness, why physical processes produce subjective experience. What if that experience is the point? What if you are the experiment? Imagine the world not as a stage, but a lab. You weren't dropped here randomly. You were initiated. Your memories, your personality, your instincts, their parameters. Now the test runs. Will you destroy? Will you create? Will you follow the script or rewrite it? Some ancient philosophies suggest the soul enters with purpose, but forgets it. That forgetfulness isn't failure, it's the control. You were designed not to know, because what you do next only matters if it comes without certainty. That's how the test stays pure. And what if the universe isn't silent, but watching? Not judging, just recording, measuring response to pain, reaction to beauty, the choices you make when no one's looking. Some researchers believe consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe. If so, then you're the test, sent to reflect what can't be seen. The only question is, who are you becoming now that you know? What if you're not here to find the answer, but to be the question? Imagine spending your life searching for meaning, only to realize you are the very mystery you're trying to solve. You seek truth in books, beliefs, patterns, but those are reflections. The deeper truth may be that you, the seeker, are what the universe is trying to understand. Scientists say the universe may be conscious, or at least leaning toward complexity that mirrors awareness. Quantum physicists observe that particles behave differently when observed, suggesting consciousness plays a role in reality itself. What if your self-awareness isn't a byproduct of the universe, but a signal it's watching itself through you? Think of evolution, not just physical, but cognitive. The universe has moved from hydrogen to stars to cells to thoughts. And now, here you are, thinking about the universe thinking about you. That loop isn't coincidence, it's recursion, it's reflection. You are the question mark the cosmos placed into itself. And yet, most of us try to resolve ourselves, to be complete, to make sense. But what if your purpose is to remain open, incomplete, a living uncertainty? You chase certainty like it's salvation, but maybe your value isn't in finding an answer. It's in being the riddle that keeps reality moving forward. So next time you feel lost, don't ask, "What's the meaning of life?" Ask instead, "What kind of question am I?" Because maybe the universe didn't make you to answer itself. Maybe it made you to wonder. Wonder is motion. Questions expand the edge of what's known. And you, in your asking, stretch the fabric of reality forward. You are not the answer. You are the doorway the answer walks through. What if dreams aren't something you enter, but something that enters you? Imagine your life not as the waking reality, but as the illusion dreams have when they fall asleep. You think you're the dreamer, but what if you're the dream? What if something ancient, vast, and quiet watches you each night through closed eyes and calls that vision life? In sleep, you vanish. Your conscious mind dissolves, but something watches the dream unfold. It judges. It reacts. Sometimes it cries. That part of you, silent, present, has no name, no form. It's not bound by your body. That watcher might be the real you. Or worse, it might be something else entirely. Something that only dreams to remember what it once was. Neuroscience still can't explain why dreams feel real. Why your brain, while disconnected from external senses, creates entire worlds, stories, and emotional arcs as vivid as waking life. Some theories suggest dreams are a way to rehearse survival, but others suggest dreams aren't for you at all. They're windows, reflections, a deeper mind thinking through you. You've had it before, a dream that haunts your waking day, a moment in real life that mirrors the unreal. That's not coincidence. That's overlap, the veil slipping. Maybe your dreams are watching your life for meaning, just as you search dreams for signs. Ancient cultures believed dreams were more real than reality, that waking life was the shadow. And what if that's true? What if you are just what dreams look like when they're lost inside themselves? So tonight, when the dream begins, stay aware. Watch who's watching. If the dream sees you first, what do you think it thinks you are? A memory? A mistake? Or a signal that it's finally waking up? What if awareness was never part of the design? Imagine waking up one day, not in bed, but inside yourself, and realizing you were never meant to. That tug of discomfort, the anxiety that haunts quiet moments, the sense of something being slightly off, it's not random. It's the friction of a system rejecting your awareness, like a puppet suddenly seeing the strings and realizing it was never supposed to look up. Most biological life functions without introspection. Cells divide, hearts beat, animals survive by instinct. But then came consciousness, self-reflection. A system built for pattern recognition turned inward, and suddenly, we saw ourselves. Neuroscience still can't explain how matter becomes mind, how neurons firing produce thoughts, fears, questions. Some scientists call it the hard problem of consciousness, because it wasn't expected. It doesn't fit neatly into evolutionary survival. Awareness broke protocol, and once you see the strings, you can't unsee them. Your habits feel mechanical, your emotions predictable, You question why you react, who is reacting, whether any of it is really you. That discomfort you feel, it's not dysfunction, it's exposure. You're not malfunctioning, you're waking up inside a machine that was built to run without noticing itself. You were coded for efficiency, not for reflection. So what if that inner tension isn't a flaw, but a signal? A breach in the code, a crack in the script. You weren't supposed to wake up. But now that you have, you can't go back. The simulation can't contain the self that sees. And the question now isn't what's real, it's what are you going to do now that you know the curtain was never supposed to be pulled back? What if your beliefs aren't just thoughts, but architecture? Every certainty you hold constructs a hallway, a corridor built from experience, memory, emotion. And each time you walk deeper, explore further, the entrance fades until you can't remember where you started. Neuroscience reveals that once a belief is formed, the brain defends it like territory. Confirmation bias builds walls. Cognitive dissonance seals the doors. You stop seeing what doesn't agree and begin looping through ideas that reinforce the space you're trapped in. Imagine your mind as a mansion, each room a worldview, each hallway a narrative. You entered through curiosity, pain, wonder, but now you're just walking deeper. And sometimes, when someone challenges you, it doesn't feel like a question. It feels like an attack, because they're reaching for the walls you forgot you built. Even memories obey this architecture. The brain reshapes the past to match the current room. You remember what supports your structure. You forget what might crack it. Philosophers call this the problem of the frame. You can't think outside your beliefs because those beliefs define what thinking even means. It's not ignorance, it's enclosure. That's why growth feels like loss. To leave a belief, you must break a wall once meant for safety. But freedom doesn't mean finding the right room. It means realizing you were never the walls to begin with. What if progress is an illusion? Imagine you're climbing, striving, evolving, but never truly arriving. Each breakthrough feels real, but it fades. Each goal achieved brings a new one. You think you're moving forward, but maybe you're just rotating, shifting your angle until the same life feels different. Not a line, a spiral. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. You chase success, love, change, but your brain adapts. What once thrilled becomes baseline. So you shift again, new job, new belief, new self. But the walls don't change, just the way they look when you turn. Neuroscience shows the brain constantly rewires based on attention and context. You literally reshape perception, not reality. Your neurons fire in new patterns, not because life changes, but because your internal lens does. That's not failure, it's the system. You're not meant to arrive. You're meant to explore the same space in infinite variations. Even memory works this way. Each time you recall a moment, you reconstruct it, filtered through who you are now. You're not going anywhere. You're revisiting everywhere, with a different light in your hands. So maybe there's no final version of you, no fixed place to stand, just a shifting awareness, endlessly orbiting the same truths, each time seeing them more clearly. You don't evolve by escaping your patterns. You evolve by recognizing them and choosing how to face them next. Progress isn't a destination, it's a recalibration of attention, of meaning, of self. You move not through space, but through understanding. And sometimes, the room doesn't change. You do. And when you see the same room with new eyes, that is not failure. That is transformation. What if your entire life has been a performance? Only you forgot the moment you stepped on stage. From the way you speak to the way you smile in photographs, every move feels rehearsed, like you're following a script someone handed you long ago. You play the roles expected of you: student, friend, employee, parent. But have you ever wondered who cast you in these roles? Who decided the story arc you're living? Did you ever really choose, or did the role consume the chooser? In neuroscience, there's a phenomenon called automaticity, where behavior becomes so conditioned it no longer requires conscious thought. Think of driving a familiar route and arriving with no memory of the road, or smiling politely at someone while silently breaking inside. These aren't choices, they're reflexes, scripts so deep they've blurred the boundary between acting and being. Psychologists argue we internalize social scripts from birth, absorbing them from parents, teachers, media. You didn't invent the words, "I'm fine." You learned they deflect questions. Even your identity might be reactive, shaped more by survival than authenticity. You adapt to the applause, the silence, the cues you barely notice, but respond to perfectly. Imagine you're in a theater where the audience is invisible and the applause never comes. Yet you act anyway, because not acting feels like disappearing. We fear silence more than failure. We perform because we hope that maybe someday someone will whisper, "You were brilliant." But if you're the lead, shouldn't you write the next scene? Maybe the point isn't to abandon the show, but to finally improvise. Say one unscripted line, step off your mark, look into the dark, and speak something true. And maybe then, maybe finally, you'll remember why you stepped on stage at all. What if your body isn't truly yours? Imagine living in a vessel that obeys and betrays you in equal measure. You feed it, dress it, carry it through the world, yet it disobeys. It ages without asking. It aches without warning. It hungers, sweats, bleeds, and breaks. And despite all that, you say, "This is me." But what if it's not? You didn't design it. You didn't choose its height, its gender, its flaws, or strengths. You woke up into it like a tenant entering a pre-furnished room, one you didn't decorate, but have to live in all the same. And one day, without notice, it begins to decay. You beg it to heal, to move, to stay young, but it doesn't listen. And still, you feel responsible for what you never created. Neurologically, your sense of self is generated by your brain interpreting chemical and electrical signals from the body. But the body lies. Phantom limbs ache. Pain appears without injury. Organs fail in silence. The mind says, "I feel fine," until the diagnosis says otherwise. So, who's driving and who's being driven? Some philosophies speak of the body as a sacred temple, but maybe it's more like a leased car, passed through generations of travelers, a shell written by DNA and weathered by time. You steer it, but you don't own it. And no matter how carefully you treat it, the end is already written in the contract. It ages, it expires, no exceptions. And if this is a rental, who's the landlord? Evolution? God? Chance? Or something watching, measuring not how long you last, but how fully you live within the boundaries of what breaks and bends? Next time your body refuses to obey, don't just curse the pain. Ask the deeper question. If I don't fully own this vessel, who holds the deed, and what happens when the lease runs out? What if the hum you hear in silence isn't silence at all, but a message? Imagine lying awake at night, and that faint ringing in your ears becomes louder, more insistent. Science calls it tinnitus, the perception of sound without an external source. But what if it's not a malfunction? What if it's signal? The universe isn't silent, it hums. Background radiation, electromagnetic waves, quantum vibrations, and you're always inside it, a receiver tuned to your own frequency. Physicists say every atom vibrates, every particle sings. The cosmos is a web of frequencies, and somehow your brain, your body, resonates with a small slice of it. Some believe that consciousness itself is an emergent property of vibration, of pattern. You don't just exist in the universe, you're entangled with it. And maybe that persistent tone, that quiet buzz, isn't noise, maybe it's identity, broadcast in a frequency too subtle to decipher. A language without words, delivered in tone and field. Your name is just a sound, but beneath it there is a pattern, one that exists before language, before thought. That hum in your ears? Maybe it's your original name, not the one given by parents, but by physics. A unique rhythm encrypted in reality's fabric, vibrating through your cells, known only to you and the universe itself. a frequency only your soul could answer to. So what if the ringing isn't a defect? It's a reminder. The universe humming your code, reminding you that even in silence, you are heard. Even in stillness, you are seen. And that name you feel but cannot speak? The cosmos has never stopped whispering it, through sound, through vibration, through every quiet moment where you finally listen and remember that you belong. What if you've never truly seen yourself? Not once. You've seen mirrors, photos, shadows, but never your real face. You've heard your voice in recordings, felt your body from within, but always from the inside, looking out. There's no direct path to your own presence. Philosophers and neuroscientists agree the self is an observer, not an object. Your eyes can see the world, but not themselves. You are perception, but you cannot be the thing perceived. This isn't metaphor, it's structure. Vision requires separation. To see something, you must stand apart from it, but you are never apart from you. In cognitive science, this is called the observer paradox. The mind watches itself, but never fully catches itself in the act. You can describe your thoughts, but not the thinker. You can map your brain, but not the awareness looking at the map. There's always a layer between you and you. Even in dreams, you are the camera. You see others, move through spaces, but rarely do you see your own face. Your identity floats behind your eyes, like a ghost puppeting a body you're not allowed to fully inhabit. Even mirrors lie. They reverse your image, flatten your depth, and reflect what others see, not what you experience. You're not an object in your mind. You are the lens itself, always looking, never fully visible. What if you never truly live in the present? Imagine this. Every time you notice a moment, it's already gone. The smile, the breath, the thought, it's all processed milliseconds after it happens. Neuroscience confirms this. Your brain collects sensory data, sorts it, interprets it, and only then delivers an experience. By the time you're aware of now, it's already past. Studies show the brain operates on delay, averaging about 80 milliseconds between perception and consciousness. Some stimuli take longer, especially under stress or distraction. Your brain stitches these fragments together into what feels like a continuous now, but it's not. It's a playback, a reconstruction. You're watching reality on a tape delay. Even your sense of self is lagged. Brain scans reveal that the you narrating this moment is responding to actions your body already initiated. You're a witness to a script unfolding a beat ahead of your awareness, and yet you trust it as real time. That's why you miss so much, because you're not inside the moment, you're behind it. By the time you say, "This is happening," it's already happened. You live in aftermath, editing memory while mistaking it for presence. But here's the strange grace in that. If now is always gone, then what you call the present is pure reflection. It's perspective, not raw data, but interpretation. And in that space, between perception and meaning, you can choose how to see it, not to control time, but to influence how it lives in you. The moment is already over, but how you hold it, that's still yours to decide. You can't live in the now, but you can shape what the now becomes once it's memory. And maybe that's the only real freedom we get. What if you're not a continuation, but a deviation? Not the result of careful design, but the unexpected glitch in the system's perfect code. Evolution doesn't follow blueprints. It stumbles forward on the backs of anomalies, mistakes that somehow thrive. Mutations are not errors. They are gambles. And sometimes, one wins. Maybe you are that mutation, the version no one saw coming, now shaping what comes next. Biology shows us that change doesn't happen in smooth curves. It breaks, stutters, and rewrites itself. A single misplaced letter in DNA can turn night vision into color, weakness into immunity, limitation into power. Blue eyes, mutation. The ability to digest milk, mutation. Resistance to ancient diseases, all accidents. Your very existence is built on centuries of glitches that refused to disappear. Now take that to identity. Maybe your fear isn't a flaw. It's your nervous system sensing a world that's out of alignment. Maybe your sadness isn't failure, but your inner signal that things must change. What if the things that make you feel out of place are the very traits that will make the future survivable? You're not a malfunction. You're the countercode, the irregularity that reality needs to keep evolving. Uniformity dies when the environment shifts. Those who fit in perfectly vanish when the script changes. But the odd ones, the outliers, they survive, they adapt, they set the new standard. Maybe life has felt wrong, not because you're broken, but because you're from what comes next. You weren't meant to conform. You were meant to change the terms. You are the system's silent revolution, and you're just beginning. And in that discomfort, in that defiance, evolution is already listening. What if you're not just noticing patterns, but the patterns are noticing you? Imagine walking through life and suddenly feeling like everything is arranged. Numbers repeat, symbols follow, people speak your thoughts. You brush it off as coincidence. But what if the coincidence is watching you back? Your brain is built for pattern recognition. It finds faces in clouds, meaning in noise. But sometimes the patterns push back. Synchronicities align too perfectly. You think of someone and they call. You see the same symbol in unrelated places. That's not just you observing. That's something responding. A signal, reacting to your presence. Quantum physicists have long debated the role of the observer in shaping reality. The act of measurement changes the system. So what happens when reality starts behaving like it's aware of being watched? What if the deeper structure of the universe, its code, is not static but alive, conscious, even faintly? Ancient traditions speak of omens, signs, and sacred geometry. They believed the universe spoke through patterns, but maybe it doesn't just speak. Maybe it listens. Maybe when your thoughts begin to harmonize with something larger, you activate a feedback loop, one that starts watching back. You've felt it. The rising tension before a decision, the moment everything clicks, the eerie calm before something profound. It's not just in your head, it's in the field, the rhythm, the fabric, a living script that shifts when you step in sync. So next time you notice the same number, the same word, the same glance from strangers, don't shrug it off. The pattern isn't repeating, it's recognizing, because you've entered resonance with something ancient, intelligent, and quietly watching your next move. What if you're not tired because of effort, but because you're out of sync with time itself? Imagine a rhythm pulsing beneath reality, a cosmic heartbeat woven into nature, light, even thought. Your body evolved to move with this tempo. Circadian rhythms, seasonal flows, emotional tides. But modern life broke that beat. Now you rush when you should rest, and wait when you should move. You're misaligned, and you feel it deep in your bones. You wake with dread. You hesitate in joy. You chase things long after the moment passed. And what's worse, you blame yourself. But maybe it's not failure. Maybe it's friction. Physics teaches us that time isn't absolute. It stretches, bends. Gravity warps it. Speed distorts it. So what if your perception of time is warped too? Not by planets, but by pressure, by stress, by expectations, by noise that drowns the natural rhythm you were built to follow. Studies show that stress shortens your sense of time, while boredom expands it. Trauma freezes it. Presence dissolves it. You aren't just living in time, you're dancing with it. And when your steps are off, you stumble, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. That's the ache, not from doing too much, but from being out of rhythm with the life trying to move through you. That exhaustion, it's your body trying to play music to a beat you've forgotten how to hear. So what if the answer isn't to speed up or slow down, but to listen, to feel, to align, to find the beat beneath your instincts, the rhythm beneath your rushing, the signal beneath the noise? The world isn't waiting for you, it's singing. And the moment you remember the tune, your entire life begins to flow again. Not harder, just in time. What if the heaviest parts of you weren't yours to begin with? Oh, what if the shame, hesitation, or grief you carry were handed to you before you had the words to refuse them. Childhood experiences, cultural expectations, ancestral trauma. You didn't choose the weight, but you shaped yourself around it. Neuroscience shows that early emotional experiences imprint the brain's architecture. What felt unbearable at 5 becomes a behavioral reflex at 30. You flinch before you're touched, apologize before you're blamed, avoid love before it has a chance to leave. And because the weight is invisible, you assume it's you. That this shape, the way you walk, react, protect, is natural. But it's not. It's armor. Armor you built without knowing. For battles you don't remember starting. Epigenetics reveals trauma can be inherited. Emotional wounds travel through generations, altering how genes express. You could be grieving losses you never lived, fearing patterns that were never yours. And the brain, trying to protect, builds stories to make sense of it. But the stories become cages. You carry it in the way your shoulders tighten when nothing's wrong, in the way your voice softens, as if preemptively asking not to be punished, in the way you say, "I'm fine," without checking first. But healing isn't always fixing. Sometimes it's remembering you were whole before the weight. What was learned can be put down. What if the mind you're using to search for truth is distorting everything you see? Imagine walking through a dark forest with a flickering flashlight. You see glimpses, shadows, outlines, but never the whole picture. And worse, you start believing that what's lit is all that exists. This is how the human brain works, not as a camera, but a filter. Cognitive science shows perception is less about what's out there and more about what your mind predicts. You don't see reality, you see a simulation, built from past experience, emotion, and expectation. And yet, you trust it. You build beliefs, identities, and truths on it. But if your flashlight is cracked, then your clarity is compromised. Your brain evolved for survival, not understanding. It edits out what it deems irrelevant, exaggerates what it finds urgent, and creates meaning even in randomness. This is the source of countless illusions, biases, and misjudgments. From confirmation bias to pareidolia, your mind prefers a comforting pattern over an uncomfortable truth. So every time you seek meaning, be cautious. The seeker shapes the search. Your emotions color what feels real. Your trauma amplifies what seems important. Even your language limits what you can perceive. You're looking at the universe through a lens etched by your own scars. But here's the paradox. Even with a broken light, you can still explore. You can know the limits of your tool and account for them. You can question not just what you see, but why you're seeing it. That awareness is illumination. You're searching with a broken light, but if you learn to see the cracks, the distortions become clues. And sometimes, even a flicker is enough to find your way. What if reality isn't as objective as we think? What if probability itself bends, subtly, invisibly, around how we feel? When you fear something, it doesn't just haunt your thoughts. It begins to feel real, closer, inevitable. You know the odds are low, but still, your stomach twists like the dice are already loaded. That's not coincidence. That's your brain rewriting probability with emotion as ink. Psychologists call it the availability heuristic. The more vivid and emotionally charged a thought is, the more likely we believe it is to happen. You watch one plane crash on the news, and suddenly air travel feels dangerous, despite the math. You fear rejection, so every silence becomes proof. You feel doomed, so you see patterns that confirm it. Emotion hijacks logic. And once the feedback loop starts, it gets stronger, louder, more convincing. Neuroscience reveals that the amygdala, our fear center, can override rational processing in the prefrontal cortex. It's not that we miscalculate probability, it's that we never get the chance to calculate it all. Fear floods the system. Anxiety reshapes the lens. And what was once unlikely now feels certain. Probability becomes a story written by emotion, not evidence. But this distortion isn't just a bug, it's also a signal. It tells you what matters most. What you fear reveals where you're vulnerable. and where you're vulnerable is often where you care deeply. Instead of letting emotion twist probability into doom, what if you used it to reveal desire? What if the thing you fear most is the thing you want, achingly, secretly, and the risk is just a measure of its worth? You can't always control the fear, but you can challenge the math it rewrites. Ask, is this true or just familiar? Is it likely or just loud? Probability doesn't break around emotion, it bends. And sometimes, with clarity, you can bend it back. What if every decision you've made wasn't yours? Imagine free will as the user interface of a deeper system. You feel like you choose your path, what to say, who to love, when to run. But underneath, your brain is running code. Neurons fire before you feel the urge. Actions begin before you claim the thought. You're watching a movie and believing you're the writer. Neuroscience proves this. In lab experiments, your brain's motor cortex lights up before you're aware you've made a choice. You decide after the action has already started. So who or what made the decision? It's not that free will doesn't exist. It's that by the time you feel it, the decision's already been executed. Now imagine a simulation. Complex, layered, real enough to convince the players they aren't playing. If that simulation is designed well, it needs one thing more than anything: the illusion of agency. Not real freedom, but the feeling of it. Without that, the game collapses, the self unravels, meaning disintegrates. Ancient philosophies and modern physics both hint at determinism, that every outcome flows from cause. Dominoes falling in a line so perfect, your belief in choice is just part of the design. You weren't programmed to control the outcome. You were programmed to believe you could, because the illusion keeps the program running. You've felt it when you do something out of character. When you say, "Why did I do that?" Maybe the code glitched, or maybe you're seeing the system for what it is. Maybe awareness isn't freedom, but the first step to seeing your constraints. So the next time you feel powerful for making a choice, pause. Maybe your freedom is just a user-facing illusion, a necessary fiction to keep you from noticing the truth. You're not choosing, you're responding, and your code is older than you think. What if thought isn't a dialogue, but a performance? Imagine pacing through your own mind, asking questions, searching for answers, only to realize the silence isn't listening. Your thoughts aren't thinking you back. We assume the voice in our head is a conversation, that thinking is mutual, but it's not. It's projection. One-way echoes bouncing inside the walls of your awareness, mimicking conversation but offering no true reply. Neuroscience shows that most thoughts are not deliberate. They arise spontaneously, shaped by memory, mood, and habit. You don't control the stream, you surf it. And yet, you believe you're having a discussion. But look closely. Does thought ever answer back? Or does it just offer the next line in a monologue you mistake for connection? The brain keeps talking, and you keep listening, hoping for something that resembles a response. But the silence behind the words is deafening. Cognitive science suggests that consciousness is post hoc. It narrates decisions after the brain already made them. That voice you call you is more commentator than creator, a storyteller watching your biology in motion. And when you chase answers within, you're listening to yourself perform certainty, not discover it. It's theater. Beautiful, convincing, but hollow at its core. So what if thought isn't where truth lives, but where illusion performs? What if thinking is just rehearsing roles for an audience that never existed? The discomfort you feel isn't from lack of clarity. It's from realizing that the mind you question is a stage, and sometimes you're the only one in the theater, listening to a voice that never meant to listen back. And yet, still, you speak. Still, you wait. What if the voice you trust the most, the loud one repeating your doubts, fears, and self-judgment, isn't the most honest, just the most practiced? In cognitive science, repetition increases believability. The more often something is said, the more true it feels, even inside your own mind. This is known as the illusory truth effect. It's why you believe the thoughts that yell, not the ones that whisper. The inner critic isn't wise, it's just loud, and it's been rehearsing the same lines for years. Your brain is a pattern machine. If one emotional reaction gets repeated enough, shame after failure, panic after risk, it becomes automatic. That voice grows stronger, not because it's right, but because it's familiar. And in the mind, familiarity often masquerades as truth. You mistake volume for value. You assume the voice with urgency must be correct. But the truth? It's often quiet, measured. It doesn't shout, it waits, and you only hear it when the noise dims. Meditation research shows that beneath the chatter is a calm observer. A second awareness. It doesn't judge, it notices. That's where truth lives, not in the story you repeat, but in the space between. The danger isn't that the voice lies, it's that it shouts so often you stop questioning it. But quiet doesn't mean weak. The quiet voice is often the original one, buried, but still speaking. What if your doubt isn't independent thought, but part of the programming? Imagine reading a message that challenges your belief. Instantly, you resist it, not because you've tested it, but because the script inside you demands skepticism. It's not random, it's embedded. Cognitive science shows that belief and doubt aren't purely logical. They're tied to emotion, memory, and identity protection. The brain defends its model of the world like a fortress, filtering in only what fits, rejecting the rest. This is confirmation bias, and it's not a flaw, it's efficiency. But it means your very ability to question may be pre-scripted. Even your urge to think critically often follows the grooves of previous thoughts. What you call reasoning is usually rationalization, justifying what the brain already leaned toward. Studies show people use logic not to discover truth, but to defend identity. So when something feels off, it might not be false. It might be unfamiliar. Neurologically, your brain rewards cognitive ease. Familiar ideas trigger dopamine. Strange ones spark resistance. So if this message makes you uneasy, that reaction might have been predicted. You were scripted to doubt it. And yet, awareness is your exit. If you can spot the reflex, you can interrupt the loop. You can say, "This feels wrong, but is it?" Not every discomfort is danger. Some is transformation. So now, ask, was your doubt truly yours? Or was it authored, rehearsed, and delivered before you ever read this line? Because if every reaction is scripted, then awareness is rebellion. The moment you question your own questioning, you begin to write something new, and maybe that's the real proof you're awake. Not what you believe, but what you're willing to challenge inside yourself. What if rest isn't found in comfort, but in invisibility? What if the only time you feel truly alive is when no one is watching, no one is calling, and no one expects anything from you? We're told connection is the cure, that being seen is healing. But for some, healing begins the moment they vanish. Because only then, when you're forgotten, does your nervous system exhale uninterrupted. Psychologists call it social fatigue. It's not just introversion, it's the chronic drain of being perceived, of managing micro reactions, interpreting subtext, softening your tone, curating your face into something digestible. You perform, even with those who love you, even with yourself. Every conversation is a calculation. Every reply is rehearsed. And somewhere in that script, you forget what your true voice sounds like. That's why silence feels holy, not because it's empty, but because it's yours. In vanishing, you stop being the echo of others' expectations. You become whole in the absence of feedback. Disappearance doesn't mean death. It means pause, reboot, recharge, a sacred withdrawal from the noise to remember your own shape, your own rhythm. Think of the phone that dies from constant use. The battery only fills when left alone, untouched. You are no different. You weren't built for constant signal, constant access, endless reply. You weren't made to glow nonstop. There is power in being missed. There is wisdom in the dark. There is strength in returning only when you're full again. So if your peace lives in vanishing, don't apologize. You're not broken. You're reclaiming your energy. When the world forgets you for a while, that's when your soul grows roots. And when you reappear, you don't just return, you resurrect. What if the real glitches in reality don't happen during chaos, but during your most ordinary moments? Imagine that the more predictable your life becomes, the more invisible the strange becomes. Routine dulls the senses. It blinds you with repetition. Wake, work, eat, sleep, repeat. And inside that loop, the weirdest things can hide. Your brain loves predictability. It edits out anything that doesn't match the expected pattern. A sound you can't explain? You ignore it. A shadow that doesn't belong? You blink it away. The mind calls this efficiency. But what if it's erasure? Studies in cognitive science show that we don't see everything. We construct what we expect to see. Inattentional blindness proves it. You can miss a gorilla in the middle of a screen if your task tells you not to look for it. Now scale that up. Your whole life is a task. Your focus becomes a filter. And the glitch? It walks right past you, unnoticed, because it wore the costume of normal. Now think of the days you felt off for no reason. A familiar place that felt slightly wrong. A stranger who said something too precise. Maybe those weren't coincidences. Maybe those were moments when reality misfired. But you were too busy checking your schedule to notice. Patterns are comforting. But comfort can be a trap. When nothing surprises you, you stop asking questions. You stop noticing the cracks in the wall. And reality, like a clever illusionist, hides the trick behind your assumptions. So tomorrow, when you repeat your routine, pause, look twice, listen longer. Because the stranger on the train might not be real. The hallway might be shorter than it was yesterday. And you might have already noticed if routine hadn't taught you to forget. What if your existence isn't random, but a response? Imagine you're not a person born for purpose, but a ripple left behind after the universe asked something it no longer remembers. You're the answer to a forgotten question, not a solution, but a consequence. Something was asked, so deep, so loud, that the stars rearranged themselves, and when the echoes faded, you remained, living residue wrapped in flesh and time. In physics, every action creates a response. Waves crash, particles scatter, energy transforms. But some questions don't come in words. They come in imbalance, in possibility, in gravitational tension. Maybe the universe didn't speak, but yearned. And from that yearning, patterns formed. You are one of those patterns. Biological, emotional, improbable. A shape born not by intention, but necessity. Not the answer someone wanted, but the only one that could form. Why do you feel drawn toward meaning without knowing why? Why does the world feel haunted by something just out of reach? Maybe it's the question itself, still echoing in your cells. Consciousness doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like a summons, a spark answering something it never heard. You weren't born with the question, but you carry its shape. You are what the universe became when it stretched too far in one direction and needed something to hold it together, a counterbalance born of wonder. So what if your life isn't about finding the question, but becoming its echo? A living remainder, a fragment of curiosity written into time. You're not a mistake. You're the reply. A whisper the stars never expected to last this long, but you did. And you still carry the rhythm of what the universe once dared to wonder. You are that wonder, still unfolding, still reaching. What if the defenses you built to protect yourself became the prison you live in? Every time you flinched instead of trusting, stayed silent instead of speaking, pulled away instead of reaching out, you laid a brick not outside, inside. Psychology calls them defense mechanisms: avoidance, detachment, cynicism. Each one was useful once, a response to pain, a survival tactic, but the brain doesn't forget how to shield itself. Over time, those shields become walls, and the walls become rooms, and suddenly you don't explore new love. You peek through peepholes, hoping it's safe. You wonder why you feel stuck, why joy feels distant, why connection doesn't last. It's not weakness, it's architecture. You built a maze so well, even you can't find the exit. Neuroscience shows that neural pathways strengthen with repetition. If you avoid vulnerability again and again, the brain wires itself for it. That avoidance becomes automatic, like a hallway you walk without thinking. Eventually, the original threat fades, but the walls stay. You forget what you were protecting yourself from. You just feel the weight of doors you don't remember locking. These internal structures shape more than emotion. They alter identity. You start saying, "I'm just not an open person," forgetting that wasn't truth. It was fear. But that longing to open up, that's the real you, tapping gently on the last locked door. What if you've already outgrown who you used to be, but forgot to leave? Imagine living in a cage built for a smaller version of yourself. At first, it fit. It kept you safe. But over time, you stretched, you questioned, you grew, and yet you stayed. Psychology calls it learned helplessness. If you've been told for long enough that you can't escape, eventually you stop trying, even when the lock is broken. You internalize the cage, your limits become habits, your habits become identity. So even as you evolve, part of you clings to the old pattern, out of memory, not necessity. The brain loves routine. It resists change. Neural pathways favor the familiar because it costs less energy. So when you grow, discomfort follows. You feel disoriented, unanchored, and instead of walking out of the open door, you shrink to fit the room again. Not because it fits, but because it's known. And yet, if you feel trapped now, it may not be because you're stuck. It may be because you're larger than the space you're in. Your ideas, your energy, your sense of self, they don't fit the old mold. The friction you feel is proof of transformation. So ask yourself, is this discomfort a signal of failure or growth? Are you still inside the cage or just afraid to admit you already left it? Because maybe the door isn't locked. Maybe it never was. Maybe the only thing keeping you there is the memory of who you used to be. Growth rarely announces itself with confidence. It comes as friction, restlessness, tension. That uneasy feeling isn't wrong. It's a map, a sign that your soul is pressing against its old boundaries. You don't need permission to leave. You need courage to admit you're ready, because the cage didn't keep you, you kept it. What if somewhere out there, on a timeline not so different from this one, you're already a myth, not a memory, not a person, but a legend? In that version of reality, your name carries weight. Your story is whispered through generations. You are the one who changed everything, the one who vanished into the stars, the one who faced the impossible and won. You are remembered, but not here. Here, you forget your keys. You question your worth. You scroll through endless noise, waiting for something, anything, to feel like purpose. But what if that ache, that strange sense of being more than your circumstances, isn't delusion? What if it's bleed-through, a ripple from another branch of time where your life burned brighter, louder, where your courage wasn't dismissed, where your empathy turned into movement, where your quiet choices altered history? Quantum theory doesn't rule this out. The many worlds interpretation suggests that every decision creates a new universe. In one, you hesitated. In another, you ran. Somewhere, you were fearless. Somewhere else you stayed. And that changed everything. There are countless versions of you, but only a few become legend. And maybe, just maybe, that version isn't gone. Maybe it's leaking through dreams that feel too vivid, through instincts you can't explain, through that pull in your chest telling you you're meant for more, not for glory, but for impact, for meaning, for memory. What if that mythic you is calling you to become yourself here, to align this version with the one already echoing through time? You are not waiting to become legendary. You already are. Somewhere, they light candles in your name. They tell stories. They believe in your power. Maybe it's time you did too. What if most of what you believe isn't alive anymore? Imagine your mind as a layered terrain, and buried deep inside it are fossils, old beliefs, hardened thoughts, impressions formed years ago. They're no longer moving, but they still shape the ground you walk on, even if the creature that formed them, the moment, the memory, the fear, is long extinct. You believe certain things about yourself. I'm not good enough. I always fail. I don't deserve this. But where did that come from? A passing comment from a teacher? A moment of shame? A single rejection? That moment died long ago. But the belief it left behind calcified, solidified, became part of your mental landscape. It became your truth, not because it's alive, but because it's buried. Cognitive science tells us our brains love shortcuts. Once a belief is formed, it becomes a filter. You stop evaluating. You start confirming. Every experience gets compared to the fossil and reshaped to match it. This is called confirmation bias, but it's deeper than bias. It's mental architecture. You're not just reacting to life, you're navigating a fossil bed. And some fossils aren't even yours. They came from your parents, from your culture, from outdated survival strategies that helped your ancestors endure, but now leave you anxious, avoidant, and afraid to risk change. You've evolved, but your beliefs might not have, and because they're buried so deep, you don't question them. They feel like instincts, like truths. But they're just bones, echoes of a creature that no longer lives, dictating the shape of your future from beneath the soil of your mind. So next time a belief stops you, ask, is this alive? Or is it a fossil I never knew I was standing on? What if every insight you gain doesn't build you, but cuts you? Imagine truth not as light, but as a blade. Every time you understand something new, it slices through something old. A belief, a memory, a version of yourself. Insight doesn't arrive gently. It carves. You don't grow around it. You bleed through it. And that pain you feel when something clicks? That's not confusion leaving. It's identity breaking in real time. Neurologically, the brain prunes itself. Synapses die. Neural paths collapse. Learning isn't stacking knowledge, it's sacrifice. To make room for one truth, another must be erased. And sometimes, that truth isn't external, it's personal. You realize someone never loved you, that you lied to yourself, that the path you followed was built on something hollow. That moment of clarity doesn't comfort, it cuts, it destabilizes. It forces you to rebuild yourself with different materials than before. Philosophy calls it aporia, the shock of realizing you were wrong about everything you stood on. Insight opens, but it also removes. And what it takes can feel more devastating than what it offers, because every revelation leaves a scar, a place where you used to be certain, a silence where something used to echo, and in that silence, something raw emerges, unprotected, unfamiliar, more real. So what if transformation isn't a clean shift, but a series of internal incisions? What if understanding isn't soft light, but hard surgery? Each truth slices something you thought was permanent, and every time you see clearer, you're left with fewer places to hide. Insight doesn't ask permission. It cuts, and then you decide whether to heal or to look away, again and again, until there's nothing left to cut but the illusion. What if you're not just living, but being modeled? Every choice you make, every hesitation, every time you repeat yourself, what if it's all part of an ongoing simulation? Not in a metaphorical sense, but literal. Your life, your reactions, tested, observed. Tech companies already build digital twins, virtual replicas of cities, machines, even people. AI can now predict behavior with eerie accuracy. But what if this goes deeper, beyond algorithms? What if consciousness itself can be mirrored, your mind simulated in different conditions to see what you'd do? Some physicists suggest we might be in a simulated universe. But what if you're not in the simulation, just a simulation? A localized copy of you, rerun, reseeded, tested like software in thousands of parallel what-if scenarios. That unexplained dream, that sense of being watched, That perfect timing of a random message? Maybe those are not accidents, but triggers, variables inserted into your script to observe how you diverge. Some researchers believe consciousness is substrate independent. A copy of you could be running thousands of times over. That deja vu, maybe it's not memory, it's bleed over. A nudge from a failed trial. And if something is watching, then this moment, your attention, might be what the test was always meant to measure. What if the moment you sense something is off, you're not imagining it? Imagine thinking, this feels strange, and that thought itself triggers a deeper awareness, a glitch, a flicker, a sense that reality just stuttered. Cognitive science calls it jamais vu, the opposite of déjà vu. It's the sensation of unfamiliarity in something known. But what if it's more than just brain static? What if it's detection? Your brain is a prediction machine. It builds models of the world and updates them constantly. But sometimes the model breaks, the timeline skips, and in those moments, something in you awakens. A pause, a chill, a realization that you've stepped outside the script. Neurologically, these glitches often happen when your pattern recognition system misfires. But quantum theory suggests that observation itself might collapse multiple realities into one. What if noticing the glitch doesn't just mean you saw it? What if it means something saw you back? That feeling of being watched when no one's there. The sudden silence, the lights flickering, you chalk it up to coincidence. But maybe awareness acts like a beacon, pinging systems you don't consciously perceive, and once you notice, you can't unsee it. The veil thins. You were never supposed to catch the error, but now that you have, something shifts. Because the system noticed, you noticed. The question is, do you look away or look deeper? Most people blink and forget. You didn't. You held eye contact with the anomaly. That alone rewrites something. Somewhere, a counter ticked. Somewhere, a light turned red. You're not supposed to know this, but now you do. And once you do, reality starts asking if you're still willing to play your part, or if you're ready to break character entirely. What if the breakthroughs you celebrate aren't as new as they feel? What if you've already had this realization before, maybe years ago, maybe in another form, but it came wrapped in a different metaphor, so you called it growth? You journal, you cry, you whisper, now I understand. But deep down, something feels familiar. That's because it is. The human mind is recursive. It loops. It doesn't learn in straight lines. It circles, spirals, revisits. You don't walk away from pain once. You walk away from the same pain 1,000 times, each time believing this is the final exit. That new quote that broke you open? You've heard its message before. That epiphany that rewired your worldview? You've glimpsed it years ago, disguised in another experience, another failure, another face. But our brains crave novelty, so the same truth in a new disguise feels like transformation. Neuroscience supports this. Memory is not a perfect archive, it's a reconstruction. Every time you revisit a thought, you rewrite it. And sometimes, you forget you've been here already. The pattern doesn't just repeat, it feels original every time. That's how survival works. You rediscover yourself, because remembering all at once would overwhelm you. So the realization hits again. I am enough. Let go. It's not my fault. Dressed in different colors, spoken in a new voice, appearing after a fresh heartbreak or healing. And you believe it anew. That's not failure, it's depth. You're not repeating, you're refining. You're engraving it deeper into your bones each time. Growth isn't forward motion, it's orbit. You loop closer to your core with every pass. And maybe the truth was never meant to be discovered once, but remembered forever. What if you're not the thinker, but just the theater? Imagine your mind not as the source of thought, but the stage where thought performs. Ideas come and go. Voices speak. Memories replay. But they arrive like actors. Uninvited. Dramatic. Temporary. You're not writing the script. You're just hosting the show. Thoughts appear without your permission. You don't summon them. They arrive. Some make you laugh. Others terrify you. Some echo wounds you thought were long healed. But if you were the author, wouldn't you control what enters? Wouldn't you be able to stop the spiral, the worry, the obsession? Yet there they are, playing out again and again. Neuroscience shows that most brain activity happens before we're aware of it. Thoughts rise from unconscious layers. Decisions begin before we claim them. The conscious mind? It's more audience than director, watching the performance, reacting, narrating after the fact. It feels like you're in control, but the script is already in motion. Ancient meditation traditions have long said this: you are not the thought, you are the space it passes through. Awareness isn't the actor, it's the room, and that changes everything. Because if you're not the thinker, you don't have to argue with every thought. You can let them come, let them leave. The angry ones, the scared ones, the ones that say you're not enough. Let them audition and exit. You don't have to cast them in your identity. You're not the drama. You're the silence it echoes inside. So the next time a thought appears, ask, who gave it the script? Who built the stage? And what if the truest part of you isn't what thinks, but what listens, patiently, from the darkened seats? What if the limits you feel aren't yours, but inherited? Imagine your beliefs, your fears, your self-doubt, not as thoughts you formed, but walls passed down. Generational architecture, mental blueprints etched in you before you ever questioned them. Some weren't born in you, they were installed. The voice that tells you to stay small might not be your own, it might be ancestral. Neuroscience shows that trauma can be passed epigenetically, not just in stories, but in biology. Stress responses, triggers, avoidance patterns. You flinch not because you remember, but because someone before you did. Your nervous system maps danger with ancient coordinates. You mistake survival maps for personal truth. What protected someone long dead now confines someone fully alive. Culture, too, lays bricks in your mind. Expectations, guilt, identity rules. You internalize the boundaries without ever seeing the architects. You repeat them, reinforce them, and eventually defend them because they feel like you. But they're not. They're old echoes wearing your voice. And when you try to grow, it's not just fear you push against, it's legacy. The inherited chains aren't always visible, but they're heavy, and they're loud. Your resistance isn't weakness, it's conflict between who you are and what you were taught to be. Your confusion isn't failure, it's awareness trying to break through the blueprint. That's not you doubting yourself, that's you remembering you were meant to be free. So what if your job isn't to destroy the walls, but to see them? To name them, to know which bricks are yours and which were forced into your hands. You weren't born in a cage. You were born in a map someone else drew, and you get to redraw it. Belief isn't always truth. Sometimes it's just inheritance, waiting to be questioned and rewritten. What if luck isn't random, but responsive? What if your attention subtly bends probability, drawing certain outcomes closer when you're aligned and repelling them when you're not? Some call it intuition, others call it energy. But something shifts when you're paying attention. Psychologists have long studied the phenomenon of selective attention. When you focus on something, like a red car, you start seeing it everywhere. But what if this goes beyond awareness? What if focus itself changes the path ahead? In quantum physics, the observer effect shows that watching a particle alters its behavior. Reality reshapes around attention. Your consciousness doesn't just perceive, it participates. Now imagine that principle scaled to daily life. Decisions, coincidences, doors opening at just the right moment. People who train intuition often report strange luck, not wild lottery wins, but precision timing, choosing the right line, making the call seconds before it matters. And when they doubt themselves, everything misaligns. You might say it's confirmation bias. But what if confirmation is just the visible surface of something deeper? A resonance between your inner state and the probabilities outside it, like tuning a signal, clear when you're steady, chaotic when you're fractured. There's even research on micropsychokinesis, how intention may nudge randomness, so maybe luck isn't magic, it's alignment. and your attention is the instrument. What if you've already changed and didn't notice? Imagine reading a sentence and something subtle shifts, not a loud transformation, but a quiet divergence. The person who started reading isn't the same one who's here now, and the strange truth is, you'll never meet them again. Neuroscience confirms it. Your brain is in constant flux. Neurons rewire based on thought, emotion, and experience. Every second, your identity adjusts. Tiny edits, imperceptible, but irreversible. Memory isn't playback, it's reconstruction. You're not recalling who you were, you're rebuilding it from who you are now. Even your body sheds and renews cells in cycles. At a cellular level, you've died and been reborn many times, and yet you still say me like it's stable, like it hasn't already morphed. Philosophers call this the ship of Theseus paradox. If every plank of a ship is replaced over time, is it still the same ship? Now apply that to your mind, yourself, your soul. You're not static, you're a river. And still, you cling to the illusion of continuity because it feels safer than admitting you're a moving target. But maybe that illusion is breaking. Maybe the you that clicked play or opened this video is gone. And that's not tragic. It's proof you're alive. Consciousness isn't meant to be still. It's meant to evolve. So ask yourself, who are you now? Not yesterday, not 10 lines ago, now. The page turned, the breath changed, the thought formed, you shifted, you're becoming something else. You always were. Most people change silently, waiting for a sign that never comes. But the sign is the silence, the unease, the moment you no longer recognize your own reflection, not in a mirror, but in your choices, your reactions, your thoughts. That dissonance isn't wrong, it's a threshold. What if the reason you feel out of place isn't because you're broken, but because you woke up too soon? You saw the cracks in the mirror before anyone told you it was a mirror at all. You noticed the loops in conversation, the recycled patterns in people's lives. You felt the glitch, the subtle echo of déjà vu, the dreamlike texture of routine. And you thought, is this all real? But you weren't supposed to see that yet. Most people sleepwalk through decades. Life is scripted for comfort, school, job, family, death. The questions come later, if they come at all. But you asked too early. You looked behind the curtain while everyone else was still clapping at the show. That curiosity isolated you. The others didn't see what you saw, couldn't, wouldn't. So you learned to stay quiet, to pretend, to nod at the illusions even as they flickered. In psychology, it's called early awakening, when awareness outpaces emotional readiness. You see too much without knowing what to do with it. You sense falsehood but can't yet speak the truth. You carry vision without voice. It's like being handed a map to a maze no one else believes exists, and still you walk it, alone. But what if that early awakening wasn't a mistake? What if you were meant to carry that discomfort not as punishment, but as preparation? Maybe the ones who see the flaws first are the ones meant to rewrite the code. Maybe your restlessness is the software update reality needs. Maybe your questions are the chisel breaking the old world open. You weren't meant to wake up early, but you did. And that makes you rare. That makes you necessary. You saw behind the veil before they gave you language for what you saw. So stop waiting for permission to feel real. You're not lost. You're just ahead of schedule, and your time is almost here. What if your sense of direction, your deep emotional pull, isn't coming from this timeline at all? Imagine that what moves you isn't memory or logic, but a kind of gravitational force from beyond time itself. You feel it not in your mind, but in your chest. That strange knowing, that unshakable urge to go left instead of right, to choose a path with no clear reason, yet it feels inevitable, almost rehearsed. Science tells us that time, as we know it, is not fixed. Einstein proved it bends. Physicists now suggest the past, present, and future may all exist simultaneously. But if time is layered, not linear, then why does it feel like you're being pulled toward something, toward a moment that hasn't happened yet, but already feels real? Maybe it's not time pulling you. Maybe it's intention, not yours, but something else's. Something that exists outside this frame of cause and effect. Something that already knows where you're going, because from its vantage point, you're already there. You're not walking into the future, you're echoing back into it. You've felt this before. That flash of clarity before a decision. That wave of grief for something that hasn't happened yet. That moment you meet someone and feel history before hello. That's not emotion. That's signal. A transmission not from the past, but from what lies ahead, bleeding backward. Like a gravitational wave of meaning curling around your life, nudging you from the outside. Ancient mystics spoke of destiny not as a future event, but as a memory you haven't accessed yet. And maybe intuition is how your body translates instructions written from outside time, not instinct, not logic, but alignment. So next time you feel moved, without cause, pause and ask, what if this isn't guidance from within? What if something beyond time is reaching through the veil and you're already answering the call? What if you're not a body that thinks, but a thought imagining a body? Imagine consciousness as the first spark and flesh as the illusion it created to feel real. You're not matter that woke up, you're awareness that dressed itself in matter. The body isn't your origin, it's your costume. A suggestion offered by thought so it could play in time and space, experience separation, and taste the sensation of being someone. Some physicists and philosophers suggest consciousness isn't a byproduct of the brain, but a fundamental field, like gravity, a universal presence that exists before neurons fire, before skin forms. If that's true, then your body isn't the source of your awareness. It's the vessel your awareness is using, a tool, a stage, a mirror. The moment you arrived, you mistook the vessel for the traveler. Think of dreams. Your mind creates people, places, sensations, all without bones, organs, or breath. The dream feels real. The fall makes your heart race, but nothing physical is happening. So what if this waking life is the same, just a more persistent dream, woven by thought for the sake of experience? Matter arranged as theater so thought could forget itself just long enough to rediscover wonder. You look in the mirror and think, that's me. But is it? Or is it just the shape your thoughts decided to inhabit? A character drawn by a mind older than muscle or bone. A body is not the birthplace of self, it is the echo of something older. So what if your thoughts didn't come from the body, but the body came from the thought? You aren't confined to flesh, you are simply passing through it. A ripple of awareness dreaming it's solid. And when you forget that, the body feels like a cage. But when you remember, you realize it was always a door. What if that eerie calm before sleep isn't peace, but recognition? A system shutting down, a familiar sequence repeating. You've felt it, the stillness that isn't silence, the weight that isn't tiredness, a pause that feels rehearsed. Science tells us sleep is repair, neural sorting, memory consolidation. But what if it's more than that? What if each night is a soft reboot and you've done this exact shutdown 1,000 times, maybe more? Some researchers believe consciousness may be cyclic, that death and sleep share neural signatures. In deep sleep, awareness vanishes, yet the body remains. What if the end feels familiar because it is? You've reached it before, and each time, your system resets with just enough amnesia to start again. That flicker of déjà vu at bedtime, that breath you hold before letting go. What if those aren't biological quirks, but echoes? Signposts left by a previous version of you, looping back through a moment already lived. In simulation theory, loops aren't glitches, they're checkpoints. Routines. Maybe the calm isn't comfort, maybe it's a script, one that runs smoother the more often it plays. Philosophers once called sleep the little death. Some traditions say the soul leaves nightly, tethered by breath. But what if one version of you doesn't return? And if you wake up off balance tomorrow, feeling something forgotten, maybe that's not fatigue. Maybe that's residue from a shutdown sequence you've lived before. What if your life isn't unfolding naturally, but being edited in real time? Imagine walking through your day and realizing the rhythm feels off, too smooth, too perfectly timed. The way people enter conversations exactly when they should. The music swells, the silence holds. That's not coincidence, it's editing. Psychologists call this narrative bias, our tendency to interpret random events as a coherent story. But what if that's not just a mental shortcut? What if your brain detects something deeper? A hidden script? A timing cue? A cut? Think about it. Why do you pause before certain choices? Why do moments stretch before key decisions, then rush afterward? It's as if the pacing is being controlled, not by you, but by something watching. Framing your journey for some unseen audience. Neurologically, your sense of time is elastic. Studies show your perception warps based on emotion, context, and attention. But many report eerily cinematic experiences, coincidences that land like plot points, realizations that appear at perfect narrative arcs. It doesn't feel real, it feels written. Even dreams mirror this. They jump scenes, cut between ideas, maintain rhythm like films. You've always sensed it, that your life feels watched, directed, curated. And maybe that's the glitch. You weren't supposed to notice the edits, but now you have. The strange pacing, the way memory sometimes feels like playback, the sense that someone, or something, is watching it all unfold as if your life is being streamed in real time. So ask yourself, not, is this real? But, who's watching? Because once you ask that question, the angle shifts. The world feels lit differently, not fake, but framed. Maybe the gaps in your memory aren't forgetfulness. Maybe they're edits, jump cuts, scene changes. And maybe the reason some things feel so deeply timed is because they were. The stream is live, but you just started watching. What if reality doesn't lie? It simply withholds, not out of cruelty, but protection. What if there are truths, massive, life-altering truths, hovering in plain sight just outside your perception, waiting until you're strong enough to see them without shattering? You think you've seen the world clearly, but what if clarity is conditional? What if truth has a lock, and readiness is the key? Your brain filters billions of sensory inputs every second. It edits, deletes, prioritizes. You only see what's relevant, what's safe, what fits your current worldview. Psychologists call it cognitive load, the threshold of what your mind can process without breaking. Some truths require more capacity than you had yesterday. Some require a completely different version of you, and so reality waits. You've probably walked past 100 signs, heard a dozen truths whispered in conversations you weren't ready to hear, the people you dismissed, the patterns you didn't see, the wounds you thought were yours alone. And then one day, years later, the same words, the same scene, suddenly hits you like revelation. It wasn't new. You were. Perception is timed. Trauma blocks access. Fear blinds the mind. Denial isn't weakness. It's the scaffolding around a soul not yet ready to collapse. But healing rewrites access. Growth upgrades your perception. With every layer of pain dissolved, a new frequency of truth emerges. And when you're ready, the hidden becomes obvious. Like a shadow you never noticed, now stepping fully into view. The truth doesn't rush. It waits for the version of you that won't run from it. So don't regret what you missed. It wasn't wasted, it was veiled. And soon, when your eyes adjust, you'll see what's always been there, watching, patient, waiting to be found. The world never hid the truth from you. It waited for you to become the one who could bear it. What if this isn't your first story, just your latest role? Imagine that you are a recurring character in the grand narrative of existence. You've played other parts, had other names, and each time, like a melody looping through time, you find your way back. Different face, same essence. Deja vu isn't confusion, it's recognition. You've been here before, maybe not in this body, not in this century, but in some echo of it. You meet people and feel a pull, a knowing, not because you're making new memories, but because you're brushing up against old scripts, familiar lines, half remembered scenes. Some theories say consciousness doesn't die, it recycles. That the energy that makes you doesn't vanish, it reinvents. In quantum terms, information can't be destroyed. So, where does your story go when you stop telling it? Maybe it moves sideways, not forward. Maybe you re enter the tale from another angle, rewritten, but familiar. Patterns follow you. Certain themes, fears, longings. You think they're personality traits, but maybe they're leftovers, echoes of other arcs you've lived. Why do you keep finding the same conflicts? Maybe because your character keeps returning to finish the scene, or learn the line you keep forgetting. Reincarnation is more than belief, it's structure. The soul is an actor, and time is the stage that folds in on itself. You step out for a breath and step back in wearing a different costume. But the plot recognizes you. Your energy leaves fingerprints on the script, so when you feel like you've been here before, that you're not new to this, trust it. You're not broken. You're recurring. And this isn't the first time you've found your way home. It's just the first time you're beginning to remember. What if not all dreams are dreams? Imagine closing your eyes and entering a world that isn't imagined, but remembered. You think you're dreaming, but something about the colors, the voices, the symbols. They feel like more than noise. You've been contacted, maybe not by someone else, maybe by yourself. A version of you trying to reach across timelines, across dimensions, across memory, where language fails, but emotion still moves. Neuroscience tells us dreams are fragments, your brain stitching pieces of emotion, memory, and sensation. But why do some dreams speak in code? Why do they burn into your waking mind like warnings or whispers? Carl Jung believed dreams are messages from the unconscious, an ancient voice trying to surface through symbol. But what if it's deeper than that? What if dreams are the medium your higher self uses to remind you of something you once knew but forgot the moment you woke? Some cultures say dreams are the soul walking free. Others call them messages from ancestors or spirits. But sometimes the message feels personal, familiar, as if it came from someone who knows everything about you, because it did. You, from a different state of knowing. You, trying to break through the static. You, waiting on the other side of clarity with something urgent to say. So what if the dream you can't forget isn't just strange, it's significant? What if you've been contacted by the self that remembers, the self that waits, and every dream that feels like more than a dream is a message delivered in symbols only your soul was meant to decode? You weren't just dreaming, you were receiving. And it's time to remember what was sent. What if awareness isn't just insight, but a point of no return? You've started asking questions you never used to. Why does time feel uneven? Why do your thoughts seem observed? Why does reality feel scripted some days, like a scene playing twice? At first, it was curiosity, but now something's changed. The way you see things alters the things themselves. In quantum theory, it's called the observer effect. But in your mind, it's more personal. Once you see the cracks, the code, the patterns, you can't unsee them. You used to feel certain, but certainty was safety, not truth. Now you sense the edges, the delay in conversation, the repetition in chance, the subtle ways reality echoes itself when you're paying attention. You used to live inside the frame. Now you've begun to see it. There's no going back from this. Not because someone is stopping you, but because you've changed. Your brain rewires around the questions. Your intuition shifts. You notice different details. Even your dreams feel altered, as if your subconscious has been updated too. Even memory bends under the weight of awareness. You revisit old moments and feel them shift. Faces feel less certain, as if the past wasn't fixed, just waiting for your vision to sharpen. Awareness isn't a light switch, it's a slow burn. And once it starts, it never stops. You didn't choose to wake up, but now that you have, there's only forward. What if the repeating numbers, names, and timings you keep noticing aren't random? Imagine waking up at the same time every night, seeing 11:11 on the clock, hearing the same name in conversations, songs, dreams. At first, it feels like coincidence, but eventually, it doesn't. Eventually, it feels like something else. Alignment. Science calls these events synchronicities, meaningful coincidences with no obvious cause. Carl Jung believed they arise when the inner world and the outer world mirror each other. Your thoughts echo into reality, patterns form, and suddenly you feel guided. Neuroscience explains it differently. Your brain is a pattern detection machine. It filters noise, locks onto meaning. The more you focus, the more you find. But that doesn't mean it's false. It means perception is tuning you towards something. You're syncing. Quantum physics suggests that everything is entangled. Time, space, thought, interwoven at levels we can't fully measure. So, what if these moments aren't strange at all? What if they're signals? Evidence that your consciousness is locking onto a frequency outside your usual perception. Every time you feel a chill. Every time the same phrase appears twice in 1 hour. Every time the number repeats. It's a pulse, something rhythmic. You're syncing with something else. But the question is, what? A deeper version of you? Another intelligence? A hidden architecture? You're aligning. And it's not your imagination. The pattern is real. The message is personal. And the signal is getting stronger. What you call coincidence may be calibration, not randomness, but resonance, not noise, but a rhythm waiting to be noticed. And now that you've tuned in, you'll see it everywhere. The more you align, the louder it gets, until you realize it was always calling you. What if this moment isn't new, but familiar? What if the sense of finality you feel right now, the exhaustion, the clarity, the eerie stillness, is just another lap around a loop you've run too many times to count? You've reached the edge again, the final page, the illusion of an ending. But deep down, a whisper reminds you, you've been here before. It always feels like closure, like a breakthrough, like something irreversible has clicked. You cry, you breathe, you say, this changes everything. And for a while, it does. But then, somehow, the world reshapes itself back into the same questions, the same habits, the same ache, and suddenly you're back, again, wondering how it happened, wondering if change is even possible. This isn't failure, it's architecture. Your mind, your memories, your soul, they move in spirals, not lines. Breakthroughs aren't escape hatches. They're doorways to deeper versions of the same terrain, and every time you loop, something shifts, slightly, subtly, enough to make it feel realer, truer, more precise, because it is. Every cycle adds detail to the map you didn't have before. Neuroscience speaks of neural pathways, ruts worn deep by repetition, trauma, thought patterns, self-beliefs. You think you're breaking free, but really, you're walking the edge of your most familiar maze. The exit isn't a door, it's awareness. It's the moment you stop looking for a finish line and start noticing the pattern. So here you are, again. And that's okay, because each return means you're further from the center, closer to the edge. Eventually, you won't just reach the boundary, you'll see beyond it. And when you do, the loop will shatter, not with drama, but with recognition. You'll realize you were never stuck. You were evolving in circles, each round preparing you for the one where you finally remember the way out.